Okay, quick, before we get started, I've got a big announcement. I've just launched my new Substack channel at drewtv.substack.com. That's drewtv.substack.com. I've been holding off on doing this for a while because I wanted to make sure that I could give subscribers more bang for their buck than the $8 and change they're going to spend a month. And here we are. With the subscription, you'll get access to paywall-only content, which are going to include private Zoom call live streams with former guests and friends of the show. We'll set those up kind of with like a theme, and then we'll just all get in there and see where it goes. You also get 10% off across the board on everything at all Drew TV websites, which now include JonesPlantationFilm.com and the Barnum World Fourth Wall merch site, and more sites coming soon. You'll also have a community of like-minded people you can connect with. Very important. And I'll be periodically dropping bonuses and things for subscribers. Look, I'm never going to be financed by the Hollywood system, nor do I want to be. I made a decision several years ago to not be chained by that system, and I'm trying to build something outside of it. And so if you like what we're doing here, sign up. If you're watching this and you've already signed up, thank you. Okay. This episode was brought to you by Jones Plantation Film. If you haven't seen the indie cult classic Jones Plantation Film yet, go watch that film. It's available now at jonesplantationfilm.com. That's jonesplantationfilm.com and on most major platforms.
Jones!
Lastly, my new film Barnum World is out, and per our Indiegogo campaign promise, it's available for free. So the best place to watch that would be at my Drew TV YouTube channel or my Drew TV Rumble channel.
Barnum statements only work if you can't recognize them. That's important.
Now, time to start this episode of Maverick and the Machine.
Insanity is what I call society. Don't tell me what to do, don't tell me how to be. I don't trust the government, I know they lie to me. Never like my body, yo, for my soul and mind to breathe.
My favorite piece of information about you is that you provided security for the infamous pop star Michael Jackson. I'll bet you got some stories from that, huh?
Actually, all I did was my calculus homework at Neverland. When I was in Afghanistan, after Michael Jackson died, I went out to this village. It was one of those remote villages like 50 miles beyond the electrical line. There's the tree line and then there's the electrical line. I was with the village chief. I said, "Do you know Michael Jackson died?" He's like, "Oh, the Michael." Yeah. Yes, we know the Michael. Starts doing the beard thing that you know they do. Please tell your people we cry 1 million Pashtun tears for the Michael. Yeah. They love Michael Jackson. They're out there moonwalking, and everywhere I go, whether it's the Darien Gap or some remote village in Afghanistan or Nepal, everybody wants to do the moonwalk. The children, of course.
Everybody knows Michael Jackson, right?
All right. I have got a serious Maverick in the building today. You there, Michael?
Yes, sir. I'm here in Thailand.
Yes, in Bangkok, right?
Right beside the Cha Phraya River, which is like their Mississippi. It's smaller, though.
Okay. Well, I just played a clip from your appearance on the Sean Ryan podcast, which is a huge podcast. Great episode. I highly recommend everybody go listen to that. Man, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me on. There's like a million things to talk about. Where to start? I mean, which fire to talk about.
Well, I've been like kind of stressed about this interview because, well, I first discovered you. Somebody was like, hey, on Twitter or X or whatever. They were like, Michael Yon, he's talking about Jones Plantation. Michael Yon. And I like looked and I was like, oh, he's got a big account. Yeah, and I was like, I retweeted you or whatever. And then I did a deep dive and I listened to some interviews with you and I was like, oh man, this guy is a freaking badass. Hey, I'm hearing myself a little bit, by the way.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
I'll put this microphone on then.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm like, this guy is like, holy case, lived in like 100 countries. I mean, I don't even know. He's like an international man of mystery.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting journey. That's for sure. The years and wars and all that were very educational. That's for sure. All of it adds up over the years. And, I've been working for many years to try to be able to protect better. Right. And to do that requires a lot of study. Can you hear me now? I just put these earplugs
Oh yeah. I'm good, baby. You're great.
Oh, good. Awesome. Let me turn up my volume now. All right. And, And, you know, over the years, I've practiced actually, you know, you can practice by yourself being a better predictor. You can just write. I started doing that when I was a teenager, actually, because I studied so much physics. And, you know, the physicists that I used to love to read, I was basically addicted to physics, like, you know, Hunter Biden's addicted to Coke, you know. And, you know, I just love physics. Crack was a crack. Okay. One of those things. And so, you know, one of the things that, you know, reading years of physics, you know, I started to adopt their thinking habits, you know, thinking hygiene, right? And trying to become more predictive, never getting married to your own ideas, never, you know, don't get emotionally attached to your ideas because they might be wrong. Your ideas could be wrong and they could betray you. And you just have to go, well, there you go. And so over the years, I just got better and better at prediction by practice. It's like playing tennis or something, right? But and especially if you're brutally honest with yourself about, okay, why did I get this right? Why did I get that wrong? You know, and over time, you just start hitting more and more, you know, more and more home runs than you do strikes, right? And you know, over the years, it gets better and better. So now, you know, for instance, Misako and I, my wife, we successfully predicted Nord Stream interruption well in advance. And in fact, we went to Germany several times. We went to BASF, big, huge chemical company in Ludwigshafen, Germany. We went there twice because this is the thing. We believe based on what they say and what they write and what they're doing, that there are certain elements that wish to cause global famines and destroy, for instance, the European economy and ours and others like the Japanese. And based on that, if you look at the whole target matrix here, what would I do if I wanted to like destroy the European economy and bring famines and that sort of thing? I would go for Germany first and foremost anyway. And I would go, if I were going for Germany, I would go for Nord Stream and I would go for BASF, right? I would go for that. So we predicted that. We predicted that. The second time we were at BASF plant, which is, you know, they first started making nitrogenous fertilizers in 1914, same year the Panama Canal opened, actually. And so we were there. We were inside the plant, Misako and I. She's walking around here somewhere. And I asked, what happens if Nord Stream gets interrupted? And the guy giving us the tour said BASF is dead, right? Or we are dead, or some, you know how Germans talk. And it was that's close to verbatim. And bottom line is, they're not actually dead, but they're very damaged. And since that time, so many people have asked me who destroyed Nord Stream, and I'm like, it's easy. I've got two suspects: United States or space aliens. That's it. I mean, it was one of those, you know. And I haven't seen any flying saucers recently. So and likewise with Groningen gas field, again, successfully predicted that. Successfully predicted that Darien Gap would be a main invasion route. Successfully predicted that Panama Canal would become a major issue, and that screwworms would come back. We predicted that 3 or 4 years ago, very publicly, about the screwworms before anybody heard of that stuff, right? And a long list of other things. How do we keep getting so many home runs and so few strikes, right? It's because of years of practice and years of, like right now, we're in Thailand. We're next to the Chao Phraya River, which is like the Thai Mississippi. We're not here for vacation. We're here because that's the main river in Thailand. And I used to have an office in Thailand, by the way. But you know, you see the latest fighting between Cambodia and Thailand. And, you know, you saw a lot of people saying it's due to that temple on the border and that 1907 map with the French and all that stuff. That's bullshit, right? It has nothing to do with that temple. The temple is the casus belli, but it's about routes and resources. It's about energy in the Gulf of Thailand. It's about, you know, the whole island dispute down there that almost nobody knows about. It's about that energy. It's about building a canal, first a road and railway across the Kra Isthmus, which is like sort of like the Panama Isthmus, except here in Thailand, there's also an isthmus called the Kra Isthmus, which means Kra in Thai means turtle, the Turtle Isthmus. So if you look at that skinny elephant trunk of Thailand, you could build a canal across there, right? And they've been talking about that for centuries, just like they talked about a Panama Canal for centuries before it actually happened in 1914. And so right now they're building railway and road infrastructure to cross the Thai Isthmus so that you can connect the Andaman Sea with the Gulf of Thailand, right? now over in Cambodia, if you look on the other, I've got a whole map library in my head. So I talk about things as if I'm looking at maps, because I actually am. I can see these maps in my head. I'm looking at maps so much, right? And so if you've got a map, pull it out. If you've got one easily at your hand. So you'll look at the Kra Isthmus, and you can see, if you connect to the Andaman Sea there, now you can bypass the Strait of Malacca down there by Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, right? That's very important, because that's one of the 7 top geographic, maritime chokeholds in the world, the Strait of Malacca. It's vastly important. Also, over in Cambodia, if you look on the other side of the Gulf of Thailand, you'll see the Chinese are working to build the Funan Techo Canal, which is a canal from the Mekong River that will also go to, now there's rumors that they're going to stop that. I don't know, or they've temporarily stopped it. We'll see. I think in the long run, they'll end up doing it. And because they're always starting and stopping, just like the Panama Canal. Panama Canal took a long time. Suez Canal took a long time, right? These things took a long time. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to end up doing it. What is this all about? Routes and resources. The vast majority of wars in the world, the vast majority, almost any war you can think of in your mind, was about routes and resources, right? Now, a lot of people say, no, Israel is about Jews going back to the promised land. Bullshit. That's about routes and resources. The reason that Israel even exists is the same reason that Panama exists. We created Panama on November 3rd, 1903, out of a rib of Colombia, you might say, because Colombia didn't want to play ball in making a canal. So we're like, okay, we sponsored a revolution, and we made a new country called the Republic of Panama. And then we built the Panama Canal, which opened in 1914, right? Likewise, over in the Suez Canal, that opened in 1869. Now, you got to keep in mind, Suez Canal, that was a massive thing. And keep in mind, there was no oil discovered in the Middle East at that time. You were still like several generations away before oil would be discovered in the Middle East, at least 2 or 3. A solid 2 generations away, right? 2 or 3. And so there was it wasn't about oil. It was about the biggest empire in human history, the British Empire, that would give them a direct shot over to India and their other territories, right? Also, it would give the Dutch and the French and others as well. So anyway, there was a lot of British that didn't actually want to build the Suez Canal because they said, oh, no, Egypt's going to end up taking it from us. We're going to end up in war with France if we build the Suez Canal. And so some of those guys actually turned out to be right, actually. But in any case, the canal did get built, and it got opened in 1869. Now, when the Suez Canal got opened, that became the most important little piece of real estate on planet Earth by far. In fact, people called it the spinal cord of the British Empire. So the Suez Canal became known as the spinal cord of the British Empire. You don't hear that anymore, but back then that was common lingo. That's the spinal cord of the British Empire, right? And so it makes it a vulnerability, but it's also a great strength. So the empire continues to grow, right? It was a big, huge help for a lot of people, French, Dutch, whatever. And it ended up in wars, obviously. Now let's fast forward up to the 1890s. Remember, the Suez Canal opened in 1869, right? 1869. We get to the 1890s. Britain continues to try to, hey, we could lose this canal. Somebody could shut us off here, right? Routes and resources, right? So they sponsored Jews going back to Israel, going, quote unquote, back to Israel, right? So Theodore Herzl and his, I've got his book actually from 1897. Theodore Herzl writes this book, and he's like, basically to build the Jüdische Staat in Palestine, right? The Jewish state, because he spoke German, right? Theodore Herzl, right? So the big father of Zionism, they say. So anyway, in 1899, they issued these shares to Jüdische Staat Palestine, right? The Jewish state of Palestine. I have one of the original shares, actually. It hangs in my library in Japan. So, I mean, the original stock issued in 1899 was all about, so this isn't about sending Jews back to the homeland. It has zero to do with that, any more than the fighting recently between Thailand and Cambodia. That fighting is far from over, and it's not about that temple from that 1907 map that the French drew between Cambodia and Thailand. It has zero to do with that. It has to do with that energy in the Gulf of Thailand. It has to do with these railways that they're building over here. That's what it has. It's routes and resources. And so anyway, let's go back to Israel. So, the big thinkers, the big Russian doll, the outside shell of the doll, right? That doll is about routes and resources. And who do they need to harness? Well, it depends on what they need to get done, but often they need to harness some anthropological, organism. In this case, well, in the case of my, ancestors, it was Scott-Irish ancestry, and they needed us to fight the Cherokee and all those guys, right? So in other cases, that's different people, different groups. Well, in this case, they needed the Jews, where they're like, this will solve two problems at once. It'll get the Jews out of our backyard, and it'll get them there fighting the Palestinians, right? And basically taking that, and then the Jews will be our basically useful idiots, and we'll end up being there and taking that land, and then we'll be, have more control or influence over the Suez Canal. So anyway, 1948, of course, Israel is formed. And as often happens with puppets, because it was a puppet state, right? As often happens with puppets, though, by the way, Pinocchio is the third most translated book in all history, right? Holy Bible, The Little Prince, I think, is next, and then Pinocchio. Pinocchio, because everybody knows deep down inside, we're surrounded by puppets, and 90% of us are puppets, right? I mean, I used to be in the U.S. Army. I was an Army puppet, right? I deeply know the puppet. I was an Army puppet, right? And so, I was ready to parachute into Poland and fight Soviets for the, basically routes and resources. We were going to attack Soviets coming across this train system through Bialystok. Anyway, but the point is we all deeply know that story of the puppets because Pinocchio is so deeply embedded in us that it's the third most translated book out there. Now, what happens with puppets? Puppets either remain happy puppets. They work for Fox News or CNN for the rest of their life. They work in Hollywood. They make movies for everybody, right? And they remain happy puppets, or they go rogue like you did, and go off on your own, right? The rogue, sometimes the puppet or never was a puppet, but gets too heavy for the strings, right? And starts pulling on the strings, and sometimes it reverses. Sometimes the puppet gets, in the story of Pinocchio, you remember the carpenter, he has this piece of wood, and he's like, hey, this is a nice piece of wood, but not that nice. I'm either going to throw it in the fire, or he's like, no, I'll make a table leg out of it. Then he starts to do it, chip away at it, and he goes, that hurts. The piece of wood's like, hey. So he's like, hey, something's up with this wood. So he, realizes it has a life, right? That he was going to make a table leg out of it. So he gave that almost table leg to somebody else who was a puppet maker, who then makes the puppet, who ends up with the name Pinocchio. What happened when Pinocchio was sort of born? Pinocchio immediately turned on his maker and attacked his maker and tried to get his maker put in jail, right? So Pinocchio was a instant victim puppet, and went totally rogue. And what I'm getting to is Israel was that puppet. Then Israel got a life of its own. And now Israel is a mad puppet, basically doing a global school shooting, right? It's totally insane. It's totally a danger to itself and everybody else. But it was formed for the same reason Panama was formed. Israel was formed to control a canal. Panama was formed, the Republic of Panama in 1903, to create a canal and control the canal, right? So that's how those two countries, right now, they're very different in nature from each other, but they're perpetual battlegrounds. You're going to end up seeing war in Panama, I assure you. And we see war in obviously Israel, perpetual war. I mean, but let's face it, the Israelis, they don't make friends of anybody. There's a lot of Thais that are ready to kick them out of Thailand, the way they behave and that sort of thing. And I've traveled with Israelis quite a lot in India and Nepal and Thailand and whatnot. And, I got along with them great, but I saw how a lot of people are sick of them, right? And it has nothing to do with Jews or anything else. It has to do with their behavior, right? And so, right now they're doing a genocide over, obviously, in Gaza. They pushed the death jabs hard, which is a genocide, right? That's concentric genocides. Gaza, and by the way, October 7th, they obviously did it. They obviously set up Hamas. Well, they've sponsored Hamas for years. Mm-hmm. But that was a staked goat, green flag attack, right? A staked goat is when you put the bait out there and wait for it to come. And it was like we did with Pearl Harbor, with our fleet in Pearl Harbor, and knew it was coming and then allowed it to proceed, right? So we could get it all on film, right? That would give us casus belli. And Israel needed casus belli to clean out Gaza. There's a lot of energy off Gaza, routes and resources. They want to build the Indo-European corridor. They want to build the Ben Gurion Canal and that sort of thing. and they want to clean out West Bank. They want to obviously eventually take Iran, which I don't know how we're going to do that with all the king's horses and all the king's men. I mean, you could go to nuclear, obviously, and we would probably get nuked by, I don't know who would do it. Could be Russians, could be Chinese. But as soon as you start cacking off nukes, everything goes, right? And you got to keep in mind, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they're that close. That's one of the closest alliances on planet Earth is Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Pakistan's got nukes, right? In fact, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan recently were reaffirming their relationship. I mean, their relationship's very tight, and I like brotherly tight, right? Because, I mean, to the point where at one point Pakistan needed money and Saudi Arabia didn't have enough money. Saudi Arabia actually took out loans and went into debt to help Pakistan. I mean, that's how close they are, right? That's like brotherly stuff, It wasn't all strategic. I mean, that was like at a different level. And so what I'm getting to is there's a lot of alliances out there. It's not like, that Iran is sitting there alone like a turtle on a log. Likewise, you look down in Venezuela, which we might end up in a war. I mean, we've been at war with them for a while, actually. I've published that many times over, I don't know, last couple of years or so or more. And it's a subtle war that most people haven't seen, but we've been at war, right? And it's mutual, right? But keep in mind, Venezuela is tight with Iran. Venezuela is tight with China and Russia. They've been building drones there for years. I've published that many times, right? I mean, they're building drones down in Venezuela with the latest technology. I mean, the Venezuelans aren't stupid and they ain't poor, right? They got a lot of money, right? I mean, it's like this idea that Venezuela is some poor country and can't do anything, or that they're, ignorant Goliaths or something is just false. And it's the same with Iran. So we've got these wars cacking off all over the place. And, and anyway, I've talked too much, sir. I should yield the mic.
No, that was awesome. Let me draw a thesis on kind of what you just said. You're basically saying that wars are caused because of greed and power, resources, routes and resources, but they're perpetuated with these sort of fantasy stories is how they get sort of the plebs to go and fight each other for the elites, basically. Is that kind of and you could actually say the same thing, and people aren't going to like this about the American Revolution, couldn't you? I mean, basically, the king wouldn't let the Americans go beyond the Mississippi, and so they ginned up this war, and everybody thinks it was because of some T-tact, but it was actually because of resources and routes, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we watched your movie several times, The Jones Plantation, because it was so brilliantly done. And, in fact, I recommend it all the time. So you obviously understand this at a deeper level than your average person by far, right? So, I mean, but for the benefit of younger people that may not have had time to catch up, because it takes years to learn these things. You're not going to learn it in 6 months, right? It's about routes and resources, and it's a multiplayer game. Keep in mind, for instance, in the 1880s, 1890s, and early 1900s, you remember the 5 civilized tribes, the 5 tribes that accepted Christianity, right? Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Seminole, and one more. And who was it? Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, and one more. Anyway, help me out, everybody. And so the 5 Cherokee tribes, or 5 civilized tribes, they were the 5 civilized tribes because they accepted Christianity. Actually, civilized is code for not you've accepted Christianity, but that you are now tax paying. In fact, and that's what it really means, that you're a tax slave. I've got the 11th census. I've got the original U.S. 11th census. It's a big book. I've got the actual original one. It's from 1890, right? And they were starting to, pull it together in the 1880s, and they finished it in 1890. It's the 11th census. And what is it? The 11th census of the United States of America. And it is taxed and untaxed Indians, right? They're counting what they're getting ready to control, right? So then they come out. This is interesting because it's very similar to Israel. Keep in mind, now we're talking the 1890s, right when the British Empire is like, hey, we need to do something about this whole Suez Canal thing. Let's use the Jews, right, to actually make a country there and beat back the Palestinians, and because Egypt is going to end up taking our canal, right? And that's the spinal cord of our empire, the British Empire, right?
They need a narrative. They need a narrative, and they can't sell the narrative on resources of power that we're going to get. They need a narrative to get the people emotionally charged. right?
That's
Go ahead,
right.
sorry.
They need that narrative. And so
Right.
that's what we did also with Manifest Destiny, right? Needed a narrative. We need a myth, right? I mean, you're all about that in the Jones Plantation. Last time we watched your movie a couple of weeks ago was with an anthropologist, right? We watched it and we kept rewinding it and like, it was brilliantly done. You did it gangster style too. You need to do more movies. I mean, it's
I agree.
unbelievable.
Thank you, though.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, to get me to watch a movie is pretty difficult. And then we watched it several times. You know who recommended it was Doug Casey. And a lot of people know who Doug Casey is. He's the famous and basically rogue investor. Masako, my wife, and I traveled with him for about a month in Thailand, and then we stayed with him down in Argentina. Right, we stayed at his condo down there, and so he kept saying we got to watch the Jones Plantation. So we watched it together in Thailand. And, it's hard to get me to sit still, but I started watching it and we're getting into it. And I'm like, unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, this guy, whoever's making this movie, it turns out it's you. Thank you, sir. And, and then I started recommending it, because it was so accurate in its portrayal, the mythology and all the little, the details of how the cockpit works, basically. Right. And you need the mythology. As you know, you've got to have a myth. You've got to have an underlying myth of. And so if that means rewriting the Bible or whatever, Schofield style, people will do it, right? I mean, and they'll capture the pulpits, right? And, Ann Vandersteel and I had dinner in Las Vegas 2 or 3 years ago with I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, and it was with some serious people. And actually one of them was a preacher from Canada. And this preacher from Canada was telling us how they were paying preachers in Canada to preach the sermons that they were provided. And it was silver or lead proposition. It was basically, I think he said you get paid like $30,000 or something. I can't remember, for some period. It depended on the size of your congregation and all that stuff. But anyway, at the end of the day, you got paid a certain amount of money and you could preach this, or they would help you shut that church down. And I wonder if that's where some of the burned churches came from. I don't know. I have no idea. But at the end of the day, that's been going on forever. I mean, I've known missionaries that are in China that have told me the same thing. And, it's not like it's just Canada or the United States, but capturing the pulpit has been a game for a long, long time. I don't know when it started, actually. It must have started many, many centuries ago at a minimum. But at the end of the day, you got to have that myth. And so let me go back to the 5 civilized tribes. They came out with what's called the Dawes Act in the United States, or let's say America came out with the Dawes Act, DAWES. The Dawes Act would provide a sort of a land rebate to the 5 civilized tribes. So if you could get your name on the Dawes rolls, right, then you would get a bunch of free land. Basically, we took their land and now we're going to give you some free land back, right? So it's like a land rebate after we, did our thing for centuries.
It's your tax refund.
Yeah, it's a tax refund. It was a tax refund. It's like you're a tax slave. And by the way, they were already on the tax rolls, because you're not going to get on the Dawes rolls unless you're already on the tax rolls, right? That's why we did that census in advance, right? And which I have, the 11th census, taxed and untaxed Indians. Y'all can look it up. If you want to buy a copy and you got a bunch of money laying around, you can get one. You can get an original. It's going to be expensive, but you'll know it's not been manipulated and messed with, right? Because you should see these things. It's unbelievable. It's very detailed.
This is the 11th census the U.S. ever did. Is that what it is?
Yep, the 11th census of the United States, right? And so it came out in 1890. So you could actually go to maybe archives.org and probably download a PDF and go to Kinko's and get it printed out. Some of these books that I want to get that are like $80,000 or something, I go to Kinko's, man, because if they're that expensive, they're really old anyway, so they're out of copyright. But what you want to do is get, an original, right? So mostly I like to get originals, but if they're like going to be something like $80 or $1,000, I'm going to Kinko's and I'm getting it for like $28, So
is Kinko's still a thing? I wasn't aware. Is Kinko's? I know you're saying.
Yeah. And Tokyo,
really?
Masako and I were just getting a bunch of old books printed over there recently. We're like, basically give a kidney or, get these for the price of a dinner. It's like, but you can get the 11th census. Like I'm almost certain you can get it at archives.org or the Library of Congress, which their website these days sucks. It used to be great. I go on the Library of Congress a lot now, but their website, something's wrong with it. I mean, I think they're messing with it. But anyway, archives.org has all these things, and you can find it and print it out. But anyway, so we end up with the Dawes roll, the Dawes Act, and then you got a bunch of people trying to get on the Dawes rolls, right? And I've got the original Dawes roll as well, right? And you can get that and download it as well and print it out, right? And the Dawes roll is, if your name is on there, you can get some land, right? And it's got your blood quantum and all that stuff. That's your ratio of, blood of Cherokee or whatever blood. Now, keep in mind, people from my culture, which is Scots-Irish, before the Dawes rolls, we're like, we're not Indian and we're never going to be Indian and we don't have anything to do with Indians until the Dawes roll came out. So when the Dawes roll came out and you could get you some free land, all the Scots-Irish, my people, were like, I'm an Indian. Okay, where's my feathers? My granddaddy was an Indian, all this stuff. That's why almost every Scot, I was raised being told that we're part Cherokee, right? How many Scots-Irish watching this have been told you're part Cherokee or Choctaw, and, Creek, whatever. And it's usually Cherokee, but often it's Choctaw as well. But if you
That's
really
hilarious. One of my best friends growing up was, not to cut you off, was the exact same thing. He said his great grandmother was 100% Cherokee. And he really believed it too. Yeah,
but then find it. Keep in mind the
funny.
Cherokee, they track their bloodlines. They track their bloodlines like Mormons, man. Like I needed to track somebody down about 20 years ago that I was investigating a long time ago. And he told me he was part Cherokee. So I went to the Cherokee Indians. Actually, one of my friends, he's a special operations guy. His first language was actually Cherokee, right? So that would be a rare guy. You could find who I'm talking about with that. But so I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm trying to track this dude down. And I know y'all Cherokee track your bloodlines like Mormons do. Anyway, it turned out the guy wasn't part Cherokee. So anyway, like normal, he's Scots-Irish though. But but the point is that suddenly when you could get some free land, we're all Cherokee. Now let's transpose that over to Israel. So suddenly you got all these people like Meliakovsky, who is Netanyahu today. His name was Meliakovsky, just like the guy in Argentina, Meliakovsky, right? They're both Meliakovskys. Maybe they're cousins. I have no idea. But they're both Meliakovskys, changed their names. What happened? When suddenly you could get you some free land and be the ruler of a new country, hey, I'm Jewish, right? Suddenly people that have not played that game for a long time are coming out of the woodwork, right? And suddenly they were wearing the kippah and everything else, where they haven't been practicing Judaism. If they ever did, they hadn't been practicing it for centuries, right? So suddenly everybody, just like Scots-Irish, my culture, suddenly are all Cherokee. A lot of people are suddenly all Jewish, right? Because they wanted that land. And I'm not saying anything bad about Scots-Irish or Jews or fake Jews. I'm saying that's what humans do. Humans do that. And now I've written 3 books on Chinese information war. Chinese are working very hard to make Chinese think that the United States is actually their land for various reasons. And I'm telling you, it's an intense information war. Americans are oblivious to it. I'm not, because I watch them closely, right? They're working intensely. They're working intensely to make them think Taiwan is part of China. Let me tell you, the number of days that Taiwan was part of China. Now, everybody, quote unquote, knows China is a runaway province of China. Taiwan is a runaway province of China. Everybody knows that. All these historians I talk with, CIA analysts, they're like doubling down. I'm telling you, it's a runaway province and yada, 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 yada. I'm like, okay, show me the money. Show me when it was, because it's complete bullshit. Formosa was never part of China, not for 1 second, not for 1 minute. It was never part of China, ever, right? Period. Full stop. Nobody's ever been able to prove it, and they're not going to be able to prove it because it never happened. Masako and I were just down in Nagasaki with a historian. He's a Japanese guy. He used to live in China, but he studies old Chinese. He can read the old Chinese characters, right? So he looks at old Chinese documents, we were with him. His name is Professor Ishii, right? We spent a lot of time with him in Nagasaki recently, and we're looking at these things. We're looking at, Senkaku Islands and all these different things in Formosa and all that. And he spent years in China. And so, and I asked him, I said, when was Formosa part of China? And he's laughing. He's like, never. And he starts, they didn't have any maps of Formosa. They had mapped the west coast of it. They didn't even map the east coast of Formosa. Like if any outsiders had a claim on Formosa, because remember, there were a lot of indigenous people there. How many groups? 11, I think. Anyway, there was quite a few indigenous groups in Formosa. I've got a whole section of my libraries about Formosa. But anyway, I think it was 11 indigenous groups that I don't know how many exist, maybe 7. Anyway, but the point is that if any outsiders were to have a claim on Formosa, it'd probably be the Dutch, actually. And if not the Dutch, then the Japanese, right? But certainly not the Chinese. The Chinese had a little settlement, whatever, but the Dutch did too, and the Dutch had it first, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, what they do is they persuade and convince people that's your land, and you can have a piece of it. Just like go to Israel, get you a piece of land. Scots-Irish, go take some Cherokee land. Go take Choctaw now. Get you some Apache land. Comanche time, right? Time to get some Navajo land, right? You should see my Indigenous Americans library. It's huge. And I spend so much time in that thing, and it's all the same story over and over and over. We do the atrocity porn. You know, you look at these books from the 1700s, 1800s, and whatever, and it's always like, they're raping white women and taking them hostage and all this stuff. And so we got to go take their land, right? This is over and over and over. It's the same story, right? And there were, like the Oatman girls and all that stuff, kidnapped and that sort of thing. Actually, some white women that were kidnapped, they actually wanted to stay with the Indians when it was over. They actually preferred living with the Indians. Actually, Benjamin Franklin talked about that. I've got his old books too. He actually talked about, he seemed to prefer the Indians himself. And he tells some funny stories. But at the end of the day, what I'm getting to, it's the same morphology of how you do these things. You do atrocity porn, like October 7th, atrocity porn, or 9/11, right? 9/11 was a clear inside job, right? And it was, it's obvious, right? And what did we do? We invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. And I spent 2 years in Iraq, and I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. I spent 4 years in those wars. One of the things that those two wars have in common is that those two countries have in common, they border Iran. Now, the Israelis were, livid that we didn't attack Iran for them after they went to the trouble of doing 9/11. We went for Afghanistan and Iraq. But our strategy was different. Our strategy was like a strategy that has often been done, and we often do, is you attack someplace, and then you build an army there, and use that army to attack a bigger target, right? So on a larger scale, if you were going to take Iran, if you were able to actually tame Afghanistan and actually tame Iraq and build up armies, then you could help. They would be a big help in taking Iran, right? But we failed in both of those wars. Now, keep in mind, this is an old war strategy. Like in 1500s, the Spanish were thinking about doing that with Japan. They thought they could invade Japan. Good luck with that. And they thought that they could raise up an army in Japan to attack China. Well, they, did their magic in Japan, and Japanese were like, we're not like the other natives. We'll give you some sword play, right? So, the Spanish did not, actually the Japanese called the Portuguese and the Spanish, they called them Nanban, Southern barbarians. They kicked their asses out, right? So it didn't work. But actually, when we were just down in Nagasaki, we were at this church, the one that got nuked, actually, one we dropped an atomic bomb on. And we were there with the priest, actually, because they've rebuilt it. Actually, the bell, one of the bells that got hit in the atomic bomb, they still use it. And they rebuilt the church, obviously, because it was devastated. It was like 550 meters away from the hypocenter. But anyway, when Xavier first went there, one of the first 7 Jesuits, he went to Japan in 1549 or so is when he was in Nagasaki, something along those lines. But, that became a big Jesuit center, and the Jesuits kept trying to do their thing, and they then sponsored a rebellion, right? And so that's where you see those, the movie about the 26 martyrs and all that stuff. The Jesuits, they skipped the part about they did a rebellion. They skip all that stuff, that they were actually burning people in Goa, India, and that they were actually burning people in Lisbon, Portugal. And they were burning people in Spain and Portugal and Italy. And they were doing the Inquisitions. They showed up to Japan and like, we're going to have another Inquisition party. And then they did the Shimabura, rebellion. And then, some of them got killed. And so now you go to Nagasaki now and you can go up that hill. Masako and I have been up there quite a few times. And they got, all the guys, on the crucifixes up there. They're all, on the crosses, 26 of them. And they're playing like they're the big victims. It's like you were burning people in India just, on your route to over. They were doing Inquisitions. But now they play the martyr. And, they've done that. So one thing I found is that people that play victim, professional victims, are always predators. I've never seen an exception to that, whether it's at a personal level or at a cultural level. Anybody that's a professional victim, they're going to stab you in the back. I mean, like gypsies. You know, gypsies, when you talk with gypsies, I've talked with a lot of them. Actually, when Masako and I travel, sometimes we'll, stay somewhere like in London and watch the bridge and, and watch the gypsies rip people off on the bridge, and we're studying. I'm showing her, this is what the gypsies do. There's the pretty one. Watch, they're going to cause a commotion. There's the little kids doing their thing, right? So, I mean, but when you talk with gypsies and ask them, why do you feel the right to do this? They actually have a myth that they live by. It's very interesting. We were talking about the myths. One of their myths is that when Christ was being crucified, one of their tinkerers came out and he stole the fourth, because you look at the crucifixion, it's got usually 3 stakes, right? Not 4. Although we've seen 4. Masako saw one that had 4 in Panama recently. But usually it's 3. And so the gypsies will say, well, we stole the 4th one. And so that saved Christ from getting the 4th one. And so somehow that transmutes into, therefore we have a right to steal from everybody forever.
Wow,
right?
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Fascinating, isn't it? Mythology.
Well, that's a great quote. Professional victims are predators. Or what's the exact quote? People need to know that one.
It's just something I noticed over time. Professional victims are predators. I mean, professional victims are always I've never seen an exception to that. It was just a pattern that I noticed over time. And then, often when I say something about Israel or whatever, they immediately go to the professional victim mode.
That's right.
I'm like, at one point I just threw that hand grenade because I designed that one myself. Professional victims are predators, because it's true. And every time I see it, people are like, that's true, because we all have lived with professional victims, right? We've all seen them, and they will end up, they always have a reason to do something bad to you, right? In their mind, hey, everybody hates me, therefore I can do anything I want. Like the gypsies are always like, everybody hates us, therefore I can do anything we want. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They do want to kick you out because you're causing problems, right?
Well, the Israelis are... go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because, you expect to be a victim, and so you do things that are criminal, and then and then people do hate you. So you're right. What did Henry Ford say? I think it was Henry Ford. What did he say? Think you can, think you can't. Either way, you're right. Right? I mean, that, you can translate that slightly. Think you can, think you can't. Either way, you're right. I think that was Henry Ford said. That's close to verbatim, but it's similar to this. If you think that everybody hates you and you behave like that, they actually will start to hate you, because, people that feel hated, they feel, that you can see the way they behave. It just exacerbates itself. And the next thing you know, it's something terrible.
Yeah, and professional victims just have such a putrid personality. But that quote is so powerful for the time we're living in. I mean, I think nobody's perfected that more than Israel. I mean, but it's also in our culture, the professional victim status, they're always predators.
Yep, they are. And, and over time, especially after, I didn't actually realize the Twin Towers. I didn't actually realize that was an inside job for quite a while, actually, because there were people saying it early. And I thought, that sounds a little out there. That was outside my Overton window at the time, because I didn't think that our government was that bad or captured. I didn't actually. So my paradigm was off. It was definitely off, right? And so anytime, by the way, you feel the emotion of surprise, like, hey, I didn't expect them to do that. That means you need to either re-examine your paradigm or the input information that you're feeding into that paradigm, or maybe both, right? So if you're like, hey, I didn't expect that Trump would do that with Big Pharma and, basically make the White House into a drugstore. And many people are surprised, but I'm not, because my operating paradigm with Trump is actually highly accurate. To me, he's easily predictable. Pick anything that I've written since forever and throw a dart at it. Pick 100 things that I've written or said about him, and then audit those. Just randomly pick them, right? And you'll see it's been extremely accurate, right? But again, so when you're like, I was wrong on 9/11. I thought that was like way over the top conspiratorial, but over time, I'm like, It's pretty obvious, actually. I wasn't allowing myself to see the obvious, right? And so there's a lesson. So you should brutally examine your mistakes, right? And like you got a good football coach, like, the reason you got your bell rung is because you turned your head that way, and you should have been looking at him. It's like, and it's likewise, it needs to be the same when, always brutally examine your mistakes. We all make mistakes. Nothing wrong with that unless you do it at the wrong time, and then you're dead, right? And so, because we're in a state of war, mistakes are paid for. This is in big finance around the world, like here in Thailand, there's a sort of a gold standard. But here, you get on the battlefields, it's a blood standard. And, you pay for mistakes in blood, in cash, on the spot, right? And so, and also another thing that's very important in a state of war is time is of the essence, right? We don't have time to collect all the information. We don't have time to deduce everything and do math formulas and check, meta testing and all these different things. And we don't have time for that. You have to make intuitive decisions, and they better be right, because if you're wrong, you could be dead, right? Or you'll just fail, right? And so, which is, and we are in a state of war. So we don't have time to look at all the evidence with Charlie Kirk and all this stuff. And by the way, the people that intentionally cause us confusion, if somebody is intentionally causing you confusion, they're your enemy, straight up. If they're trying to confuse you, they're your enemy. Obviously, it wasn't some guy on the roof that shot Charlie Kirk, right? I mean, because if there was a guy on a roof with a 30-06, he's not the one that sanitized the crime scene, right? Obviously, he didn't say. So whoever sanitized the crime scene, that's the beehive of the guilty parties. Likewise with the Trump day, with the so-called assassination attempt, another bullshit. They sanitized that crime scene, right? Likewise on 9/11, sanitized the crime scene. October 7th in Israel, sanitized the crime scene. Epstein Island, sanitized. Epstein dead in jail, sanitized. USS Liberty, sanitized as much as they could, and it lasted for years, sanitized, right? So, I mean, this is, whenever you're confused, one of the ways to get out of confusion is to change the lens on your camera, right? If you're looking at something too close, like if you're all confused, who could have done this, and you're just focused on like where the bullet came from that killed Charlie Kirk, or is he even dead? I mean, I don't know. Objectively, as a first principle, I don't even know if he's dead. I mean, I think he's dead, but how do I know? I didn't see the body. I wasn't there. I didn't get any blood on me, and if I did, I didn't get it tested to see if it's his, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, as a first principle, I don't actually know if he's dead. I think he is, but how do I know? But anyway, so you got people focused on which way did the bullet come from and all this stuff, and spending a lot of brain cycles on this. Like, who's the guilty party? It's like, again, change the lens on your camera. Let's go wide angle. Let's look at Trump Day. Let's look at October 7th. Let's look at 9/11. Let's look at USS Liberty. Let's look at a lot of Epstein Island and Epstein murder. Let's look at so many other things on the time lapse here, and you see, well, that was obviously Zionist. Obviously Zionist. Charlie Kirk was a puppet. He was Pinocchio. They were throwing huge money at him. I was with those guys, TPUSA, over in Arizona at the midterms, right? I stayed at the same hotel they stayed at, just coincidentally. I wasn't there because they were there. I stayed at that hotel because that's where the action was. They were counting the votes and all that stuff. And the TPUSA guys, I didn't really know who they were. I'd just come in from Asia, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere and see this election. I actually literally came in from somewhere in Asia to, I don't even know where I was at, but I wanted to see the elections, right? So I was like, well, where are they most likely to steal these elections? So I picked Maricopa County. Out of thousands of counties in the U.S., I went to Maricopa County. So there I was, staying at this resort with all the key people, and there was those guys, TPUSA. I didn't really know who they were because I'm doing bigger stuff than TPUSA, you know what I mean? On the scale of things, they're like little gnats, right? To Americans, to university students, they're a big, big deal. On the global scale, they're just a bug on the windshield, right? But so I'm there, and I'm watching these guys, and they're drunk, staggering drunk, like a bunch of morons, aggressive, and that sort of thing. And I asked a guy, I don't drink. I asked somebody, I'm like, who are these fools, right? And he's like, that's TPUSA, and I'm TPUSA. I mean, he's like, Turning Point USA. And I was like, oh, I've heard of those guys. So I messaged the band, and I pick up my phone. I'm like, hey, that's your guys, right? The Turning Point idiots? They're over here drunk as a skunk. I messaged to him. I said, they're sitting out here by this fire at this, resort thing by I'm sitting out here watching these guys. They're about to fall in the fire. And these are supposed to be the big Christian guys, right? You know what I mean? And I was told some of those people were fired. But the point is then after that incident with TPUSA, that's when I started asking people, who are these guys? So I start, because I know a lot of people like you do, you know what I mean? So it wasn't difficult to know a lot of the inside scoop. Then I'm like, so this is another one of those fake Christian organizations, right? Obviously, right? This is clearly what it is. It's clearly as fake as the day is long. Tammy Faye up there crying, all that stuff. I mean, this is like, it's obvious. It's right in front of our faces, right? And so, but who killed him? Obviously, he was built up. Keep in mind, Charlie Kirk was a puppet. Let's go to the big puppet. The big puppet masters are about routes and resources and ultimate power. The power over, creating a new religion type stuff, right? Big time, right? And then underneath that, the next level will be actual puppets like Netanyahu and Trump. These are actual puppets, but they do have a lot of executive function too. They're puppets that are alive, but they are puppets. But they do have some executive function. They can do things, right? And they can pull on the strings too, right? And then below, like let's say the Trump level, or Netanyahu and Trump, TPUSA would be one of the sub puppets, right? And under, let's say, Charlie Kirk, who is we got the big level, and then we got like the Trump level, and then we've got a lot of people under like at the Charlie Kirk level. And Charlie Kirk, his mission, they have so many influencers. His mission is to corral up a lot of these young people at these universities, right? So he's going around doing all these speeches and whatnot, doing his Charlie Kirk stuff. And now, at some point, this is what I think happened based on looking at the fact pattern. What I think happened was Charlie Kirk's base started to drift away. Now, Charlie Kirk, let's say this is Charlie shining a light on his people, right? So here's Charlie Kirk, the puppet hanging on a string, and his job is to keep these guys below him in, pro-Israel. And let's go do Gaza. Let's go do Iran. So if those guys below Charlie Kirk, millions of them, if they start to drift away, now Charlie Kirk, his boss up here, his string pullers, which would be like Trump and Netanyahu level. So his, next level is pretty high, right? And so if his strings are starting to get pulled by those strings, his base is moving that way at a glacial rate, but it's huge, right? So his base is asking questions about Epstein. His base is asking questions about Gaza, a clear genocide. His base is asking questions about Death Jab, which killed people in their own families. His base is asking, why can't we pay our student debt? Why are we in student debt when we're sending billions of dollars to these people you're defending, Israel, right? Why? So Charlie Kirk's base is rebelling against Charlie Kirk, the puppet. He's a clear puppet. He's Pinocchio, right? And his puppet master wants to go to war with Iran, and Charlie Kirk is losing his base. So the strings he has on his base are pulling him this way, and the strings above are, so Charlie Kirk's being pulled in half by the horses, right? And so what's Charlie Kirk going to do? If he loses that base, the mass of that base beneath him, if he can't control them and he loses them, he's not valued to Netanyahu or Trump either, right? So he's going to go to be a normal, at this point, go back and be a normal blogger. You're not going to be flying around in the jet anymore, right? And seeing all the pretty girls, right? You're going to be a normal blogger. You're going to have fun. Thank you, sir. But what I think happened, looking at a lot of his videos and that sort of thing, just a life of experience, looking at things like this, I think Charlie Kirk had a political bone in his body, and he decided, like, I either stay with my base. I've lost control of my base. But I'm of no value to anybody without that base, right? And so I think because he started siding with the base. Charlie Kirk started echoing the voice of his base, right? And that didn't sit well with Boss, right? And Big Boss is like, we'll kill you, right? And was crystal clear about it, and now he's dead. That's what appears to have happened. Again, on the scale of all this stuff, on the scale of his base, Charlie Kirk's a big guy and all that stuff. He's got the light coming down. He knows Trump. He's hanging out with Trump. Netanyahu calls him up. But on the scale of the big war, he's a bug on the windshield, right? He's a nothing. On the big scale, he's a nothing. On the big scale, Trump and Netanyahu are nothings, right? On the big scale. On the big scale, entire countries get wiped out and millions of people get killed. On the big scale, death jabs are spread around the world and tens of millions of people are already dead, right? And more are dying and they're rolling out more of them. So on the big scale, that's nothing. That's just a little firefight in the alley that morning, right? And so what I'm getting to is Israel is clearly losing its base in the United States. And some of it, it's hard to tell if it's intentional because, you know, sometimes sabotage it can be actual sabotage or it can just be gross incompetence, right? Like sometimes in an insurgency, often the first reaction of, you know, somebody doing something you didn't want is to come in with more force, right? So sometimes when you come in with more force, you create more resistance, right? And you create even more resistance, right? And so, and it's hard to tell if Netanyahu, as an example, because he's clearly overtly threatening Americans at this point. He's nakedly threatening Christian Americans who support him, right? Openly, right? I mean, seriously, we have given them hundreds of billions of dollars, if not more, and they are assassinating Americans, right? And you know, AIPAC is controlling so much and that sort of thing. And who knows what's happened to America's gold? Do we have anything in Fort Knox? Who took all that gold? I don't know. I know there's a lot laying around the White House recently. And keep in mind, Trump is a Zionist. He's an open Zionist. When I was saying this way back when, people were like, oh, no, you can't come on this show anymore. You know, a couple of days ago, I was on Alex Jones, right? Maybe 2 or 3 days ago, right? Three days ago now or so. He asked me to come on regarding something. So we're on the show, and I started talking about this sort of things. And he's like, well, come on tomorrow, which would be yesterday, right? I think it was yesterday. I can't. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on here. Anyway, it was all happened this week. And so, you know, I came on and, you know, I stayed on longer than he wanted me on for. And I started talking about these sorts of things we're talking about now. He said, well, come back on again tomorrow and we'll come on for an hour. So I'm like, okay, got everything set up right here. And then when it came time to come on, nope, canceled. Why? This guy, Ezra Levant or whatever his name is, had actually flown in and took a huge amount of time, right? And took that spot, right? What was up with that, you know? And so a lot of people are messaging me. My inbox got, you know, tidal wave, and they're like, why didn't you come on Alex? And I was like, because he found the schedule got full. And they're like, well, this guy is on, and, you know, people are sending me links. So anyway, at the end of the day, what I'm getting to is that lobby is incredibly rich, obviously, you know, like over the top, and they're willing to assassinate people like day in and day out, right? I mean, they'll kill 1 million people. I mean, genocide in Gaza, I mean, that's nothing. I mean, they flatten it. Look on Google Earth and look at Gaza and look at what they've done to that place. You don't need a satellite. Look on Google Earth. You don't need your own KH-11 or whatever. Look on Google Earth and look and see what they've done, right? I mean, they're devastating the place. And anyway, you wanted to say something. I'm rambling.
Well, no, you bring up an important point, and I don't mean to go back to my film, but this is a really important thing, that this is how people get tricked, I think, is that there's a scene in the film where he said, you know, most people are weak-minded or nothing, so I'm paraphrasing. They're at the top of the stairs. It's one of my favorite scenes. He said, to wield real power, you must be willing to do what most consider unthinkable.
Bingo.
And the guy says, what most people would consider unthinkable is that men like you even exist. And then he says, that's our greatest advantage. And I think that what you're talking about is they're willing to do anything. They have they'll kill 1 million babies if they have to. They don't care. And most people think, oh, they're in there, they're doing their best. It's hard, and they're trying to do their best. They don't understand the level of evil that these people, and this brings me to my next point, because we
replayed that part. We replayed that part several times when we watched it the last time. That part is key. What you just said. I hope you'll cut that and put that little tiny part. That's an important teaser.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll put it in the show. We'll see. I'm going to be editing this together. But you wrote an article that I read, your Substack, which is a great Substack. Everybody should follow.
Thank you.
Especially since you're like an international man, you'd be writing articles all over the world. And you go where the action is. But you wrote an article, and I'll put it in the link for the delight of the audience. But you talked about cults. And that brings me to, you say the big picture, big picture. What's big picture? Are we talking about Satan here? Talk about that and the cults and who's actually really in charge, in your opinion.
That's something we talk about every single day. Masako and I talked about that quite a lot today. Like, who's actually in charge of this thing? Is it the organizational structure? Is it the underlying myth? Is it, is it some few with high executive function?
The Prince of Darkness. The Prince of Darkness.
Exactly. Satan. I think it's a combination. We were literally talking about this over dinner tonight, and we were talking about it walking down the sidewalk today. Is like who. Like, what's actually, what's the substrate here? What's the main current here, right? And some of it, I think there are actual major actors. Soros isn't one of them. Soros is a sub-actor as well, right? And, but there are architectures as well, organizational structures. As one retired or now passed away, rest in peace, Colonel told me years ago, organizational structure dictates outcome. He could have actually expanded that to mythology often. If you want to really predict wars and be highly predictive, you need to spend actually years studying routes and resources. You're not going to learn this stuff in 6 months, and you need to spend actually years studying mythology, right? Mythology is another part of this because people unconsciously, I say people, I mean me too, right? We will unconsciously, as a group and as individuals, seek to fulfill our myths, right? And like the hero myth, The Hero with 1,000 Faces is a great book by Joseph Campbell. I've read it several times, right? In fact, I've read a dozen of his books. And, actually another interesting guy, I read a dozen of his books. He passed away recently, was Jerry Spence. I read, I think, exactly 12 of his books and exactly 12 of Joseph Campbell's books. But at one point, Jerry Spence, who recently passed away, rest in peace. That was that lawyer was unbelievable. He's like the number one U.S. trial lawyer in history, I think, when it came to slaying, insurance companies. But Jerry Spence, at some point I'm reading one of his books years ago, and I'm like, why do I like him so much? I think one of the reasons I liked him was because he was brutally truthful, even about his own clients. He'd be talking about his own clients in the way that like the prosecutor would be embarrassed to talk about him. I'm like, who would talk about their own client? Like, you're making me want to lock up your client. You know what I mean? But the point is he built a lot of credibility by just like, yeah, my client was basically a worthless alcoholic who did all this other stuff, but he didn't rob that bank, right? Because what he's on trial for is not that he's a useless guy doing all this other stuff. And he's that guy, he should probably be in jail for that. But he didn't rob that bank, right? You know what I mean? And what's on trial here, Jerry Spence would always say, is our system. Right? Is our, we can't just throw him away because he's a bad guy if we don't have evidence of that specific crime, right? And that's very important, right? And so he would make that case, but he had such credibility because he was just so brutal about it. But also it was more than that. I'm like, okay, I really greatly enjoy that level of honesty. But at the same time, there was something else that made me like him. And I'm like, what is it? I'm trying to figure it out, right? And that made me trust him, actually. And I'm like, he's doing something. What is it? And again, I had been studying mythology quite a lot. And at some point I realized, Jerry Spence is subtly infusing mythology into his arguments. But he did it in such a subtle way that at one point it popped off the page. I was like, oh, bingo, there it is. Like, for instance, at one point he was making the prosecutor look like Satan, right? But the way that he did it was kind of obvious. Like, he speaks all these foreign tongues in the bright, shiny suit and the shiny shoes and, speaking in all these tongues, right? And, he's perfect hair and all this stuff. You know what I mean? He was making him to be the perfect, and it was the way he described him. I'm like, he's describing the devil without seeing it, right? Anyway, so you would see that and when I started rereading some of Jerry Spence's books with the theory in mind that I thought he was using mythology to persuade juries and to persuade audiences, then I was like, oh yeah, bingo. Actually, now that I've somehow managed to see it, then it becomes quite clear. He was masterful at it. And actually, he never really lied about it. He would talk about mythology sometimes. So once you're dialed into it, you can see it. But what I'm getting to is that substrate mythology. If you want to understand what's likely to happen, say, in Israel, there's not going to be peace. There's a Suez Canal right there. And there's gas off of Gaza, right? And there's an Indo-European corridor that can be built there, Ben Gurion Canal, right? I mean, there is no chance there's going to be peace there. And there's not going to be peace in Panama. There's going to be a war in Panama For sure, because Panama is a juicy lamb with pork chops around its neck, and it's got the Panama Canal going through it, right? And it's got a lot of gold. It's got a lot of copper. It's got a lot of lumber. It's got a route that you can build a railway and a road down to Colombia. And people tell me all the time, it's impossible to build. One guy told me, we were standing next to the Panama Canal together. We're standing next to the Panama Canal. And he told me, because we were talking about them building I spent a lot of time in Panama. So we're standing, this is like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. So we're standing next to the canal, and I was talking about, they're going to build a road down to Colombia. He's like, it's impossible. They can't build a road to Colombia. I'm like, dude, you see that ship going by? That's the Panama Canal. Hello. We're standing next to the impossible canal. If you fall, you're going to fall in it. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you mean they can't build a road through the Darien Gap? It's child's play. I'm down there all the time. The reason there's no road through the Darien Gap is because we didn't build a road through the Darien Gap. That's the only reason it's not there. It's not there because it's impossible. In fact, it'll be very, very simple, right? And right now, I'm the one personally who found the 2 bridges that they're building down there right now. I found them because I spend so much time in the Darien Gap, and I kept looking in this one area. I'm like, well, if I were going to build a road to Colombia, I would build it right here, right? And so I kept, and it's along old, that's why I like old maps so much, because they had mapped this stuff out like, 300 years ago, right? Where they would do it. And seriously, it's really, really old maps. I'm not exaggerating, like really that old, right? And so I was looking where they were talked about doing it for so long. And I kept just, I would be down with the Indians or whatever. And I would always go check that one area before I left. And I went down there. I'm like, boom, there's a bridge. And then I launched the drone, send it further out in the jungle. I was like, they're building another bridge. And so they're building. So anyway, it's right along the perfect azimuth to go to Colombia. So I drive up to Panama City that day, and I go meet some people in the government. I'm like, who's building the bridge down there? There's no sign or anything. And they're like, we're not building a bridge in Darien. I'm like, yeah, you are. And they're like, no, we're not. And I'm like, you are. Look at the mud on my boots, man. I just left. I was there like 6 hours ago. It's like I just left the jungle. You're absolutely building 2 bridges there. And I think they honestly didn't even know. I think they honestly didn't know. I don't think they were lying. I think they just honestly didn't realize that somebody's down there building the government obviously knows, but those people that I was speaking with didn't know. But what I'm getting to is Panama is vital terrain on the planet, right? It's a place that if you're going to control this world, you need to control Panama. You need to control Suez Canal. You need to control the Strait of Gibraltar, the Bosphorus. If you want to really control the earth, like routes and resources, the main ones you want to go for are Panama Canal, Strait of Gibraltar, Turkish Straits. That's going to be a hard one. You need to go for Suez Canal. That's going to be a tough one, but it can be done. And the Strait of the Bab al-Mandeb, which, the Houthis with their sandals and rockets have closed that down repeatedly, right? And Strait of Hormuz. If you get the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Malacca, right? And the Danish, I don't think you're going to get the Danish Straits in the short term, but you can get it in 20 years from now, right? And so if you get the Danish Strait, if you get those, especially if you just get Panama and you get Suez and Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandeb, seriously, you're going to be able to strangle down a lot of countries and get a lot of you're going to be able to squeeze a lot of gold and supplication out of them. If you can take Iran, which I don't know how you're going to do it without nuclear weapons and probably get nuked in the process, but if you were able to control the Strait of Hormuz, then you would have unbelievable control. You would have unbelievable influence with Saudi Arabia, right? With UAE, with Bahrain, with Qatar, obviously, with the Emirates, and with Kuwait and Iraq as well, not to mention Iran. So if you could control the Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, and if you could manage to get the Strait of Malacca, which, China is making a lot of preparations not to get choked down in Malacca. That's why they're building railways right here in Panama. That's why I'm here, right? I'm in Thailand. That's why they're building the railways down here, but they're also building over in Panama as well. And in fact, just like 2 hours ago, I got a video from Panama of today of the construction on the 4th bridge that China's building right now as we speak. As we speak right now, China's working on that 4th bridge. I just got new video from it.
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's get to the Americas, because you talked about earlier that there's a war going on. And if you could kind of tell the audience what's going on at the Darien Gap and kind of explain because a lot of people can't, especially like libertarians and anarchists, they can't seem to walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to immigration, which is like you and your family trying to make a better life for yourself somewhere, and mass migration, which is an attack on the local population, right? It's an organized finance attack on the local population. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because you're an expert in that, no?
Well, I've been across the entire U.S. southern border. It took many months to do that. I've been from all the way from SpaceX. I've been to SpaceX dozens of times. That's right on the border. There's aliens that come across Mexico to SpaceX property. Literally, aliens come on the SpaceX property while aliens are preparing to leave SpaceX property on spaceships, right? I mean, to go to Mars. But anyway, so I've been across the entire border all the way to San Diego. It took a long time. A lot of that was on the Mexican side as well. But what's going on in Darien? I've been, looking at this in Guatemala and all over Mexico and, so many countries. Just like 30 countries just in the last 4 or 5 years, looking at just this, right? Canada and Bahamas, they come across Bahamas. What's going on? So what's going on? Let's get to the bottom line. Bottom line is we're being invaded. It's just like we invaded and took the land from the Indians. But keep in mind, this isn't anything new. A lot of people think, well, that's impossible. Nobody would do that. And I'm like, brother, they do this like plowing the field and planting more corn. This is common. This is so common, I wouldn't even know where to start in giving you examples, right? You should see my library, right? Masako in my library. This is like huge sections of Fabian stuff and everything else, like causing famines, like intentionally, like not how to avoid famine, how to make famine, right? Not how to avoid immigration and immigration with an E or an I, but how to actually replace people, like, create Israel. You know what I mean? Create Israel. Mm-hmm. Create Israel with people that aren't from there, because that way you can control the people that come in, right? Because they'll be from disparate places with disparate languages, right? But now Israel has got, but actually Israel is not really, it's amorphous itself. I mean, it's right on the verge of civil war itself. But anyway, but the idea of replanting people, plowing up who's there and replanting them with others, this is common. It's so common. It's as common as building a new high rise or a new bridge. I mean, it's like usually it's on small scale. Like, for instance, I was researching something in San Francisco, I don't know, 25 years ago, and it had to do with, it was some crime I was investigating. Actually, it was about a cult. Actually, it wasn't some crime. It was actually fascinating. It was a crime I was investigating. But anyway, as I was studying the history of that area, because I was trying to figure something out, and it was in the area of 2nd Street and Folsom in San Francisco, right? So 2nd Street and Folsom. So I went over there and I was researching it. And at the end of the day, I looked at old archives and historical records, and there were a lot of people living there that were kind of poor, and this was prime real estate, and people wanted to move those poor people out so that they could have that land and make rich people land out of it, which they did. But if you look in old newspaper articles and look up what I'm telling you in the area of 2nd and Folsom Street in San Francisco, you'll see there was a huge political fight. Hey, they're trying to move out the people that have been here for generations because, the rich people are trying to take it. And they did. The rich people took it, right? And so I was researching a specific hotel where I think a murder happened, actually, for a cult murder, actually. But actually, anyway, not to go into that. But at the end of the day, I found the old hotel and I found the new owners and I got old photos of it and that sort of stuff. But I did a historical background first, and I realized it was one of those replanting of populations. This stuff happens all over. You go to Portland now. You go to Portland, where I've been out there with those Antifa clowns quite a lot. They're puppets, obviously. I've spent a lot of time with Antifa in, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Philadelphia, actually Hong Kong, believe it or not, and San Francisco, a lot of places. I've been out with Antifa a lot. But the Antifa guys, if you look at, or let's say, not Antifa, let's look at the bums in Portland. Bums shitting all over the streets, everywhere, needles everywhere. It's horrible, man. It's absolutely horrible, right? And but what are they doing? They're depressing those property values, and they'll be able to buy them, right? This is simple stuff. They're drugging people up. They're losing all their properties, right? First of all, you make money off of selling the drugs, and you're dumbing the people down. They watch Dopehead Joe Rogan. Everybody's like, yeah, Joe Rogan's got these good guests on, great guests. That's why I watch him. Yeah, of course he has great guests, because he has a big smorgasbord of great guests and a drop of poison. Hey, let's do some drugs together, right? These drugs. So I mean, that's another way of depressing the property values. It's just drug people up, bums everywhere, fires in Hawaii, whatever, floods in North Carolina, which are mysterious. They're taking down water infrastructure across Europe, right? There's even a website I found about that a couple of years ago. In English, they're bragging about it. This is the water infrastructure we're tearing down. So, you can end up with floods that you never would have had 100 years ago. I mean, if you have a home now that may have never had a flood in your whole lifetime or your granddaddy's lifetime, but what you don't realize is 20 miles away, somebody took down the water infrastructure, and when the right rain comes, you're going to be floating away, right, in the middle of the night. And because they're taking down infrastructure that nobody can see. They're depopulating areas, right? There's many ways to do it. One is food supply. That's a big one. Another is obviously war. Another is drugs. There's many ways to depopulate people and repopulate. So basically, you're coming in like a farmer. You're plowing up the land of the people that are there. 5 civilized tribes, whatever, Trail of Tears. You're doing all this stuff, right? Killing the Comanches, killing the Apaches, whatever. And it took centuries to do that in the United States and to basically take most of the United States, right? Or America, and then create the United States. And keep in mind, the United States, our country, was actually born of globalism, right? I mean, you had, the first major sort of maritime globalist action, you could say, was Portugal in 1415 when they hit Ceuta, right? They hit Ceuta. They hit, they sailed around the corner through the Strait of Gibraltar, one of those 7 choke points. And they went over there and they hit Ceuta. And they got a bunch of gold and whatnot. That was the first, no kidding, maritime, international, new super globalist attack. Was 1415, arguably. But I think it's a strong argument, though. And so there was nobody else doing globalism at the time, right? There was, before it was like Romans in the Med and stuff like that, Genghis Khan running around doing his thing. But there was nobody really that could jump on ships and had compasses and maps and that sort of thing. So, Prince Henry the Navigator, he was a navigator. Prince Henry the Navigator, he got, he started looking at, the best ships and improving navigation technology. And before you know it, ships and navigation were, both getting better, and map making were all getting better at, simultaneously. And the next thing you know, the Portuguese are hitting other targets. They're starting to make colonies. So in 1492, this guy that we've all heard of, Spanish, he sails over and he goes with the Spanish fleet over and he runs into Cuba, and he's like, hey, I found Japan. And, and he runs into America and he says, hey, Indians, right? Keep in mind, in 1492, there was no maps. I mean, on European maps anyway, the Americas were not even on the maps in 1492. So that was when the Spanish and the Portuguese now are the two globalists, right? And now that's 1492. So they're on the Iberian Peninsula together, right? And so the Pope, Alexander VI, he's like, my boys are going to go to war with each other. There's a whole big old world out there. Of course, they didn't know how big the world was because a lot of people still thought it was flat. Others didn't think it was flat. Like the Erdapfel globe came out in 1490 or 93. I've got one, actually. And the Erdapfel is the oldest existing globe, right? I've got one that's a couple hundred years old, but it's not, obviously not from 1490. It's just a couple. But on the Erdapfel globe, which actually in German means earth apple, but actually it means potato. And Erdapfel, earth apple, but it means potato in slang down in Austria and Bavaria and Switzerland too, I think. Anyway, but this Erdapfel globe, there's no Americas on it. I got one in my library, right? And so but so that's all they had back then. But the Pope was like, Spain and Portugal are going to go to fighting to each other. So he did the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, and he drew a line. He's like, on this side is Portuguese, on that side is Spanish. And that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese today, and it's got a bunch of black people in it that the Portuguese brought over as slaves from Africa, and they speak Portuguese because Brazil was on that side of the Treaty of Tordesillas, right? And then the other side, they speak Spanish because of that 14. That was the Pope, right? The Pope drew the lines in the earth, right? And it was like, you stay on your side, and you stay on your side. Then over time, they start mapping out more of it. And they're like, hey, there's a lot more stuff out here than we realized. So he did another treaty in about 30 years later. And that was when Japan fell on the Portuguese side of that map. That's why you had Portuguese Nanban, Southern barbarians, showed up to Nagasaki and like, hey, we're here to take what's rightfully ours. And the Japanese are like, are you now? So we're going to have a discussion about this one, would include your body parts on the beach, right? So, but the Portuguese were used to running around to places like India and going to places like Goa where they could just, push people around and that sort of thing, and then you show up to some countries and it's like, not here, brother. It's like, and so they had a hard time with Japan, and which would end up later on, it would grow into other things. So at the end of the day, you had Spain and Portugal were the first original G's, the gangsters when it came to globalism. Then you start getting other people involved, obviously Great Britain, Netherlands, East India Company, and all this stuff, right? And keep in mind, like my family came over in 1609, and they were with the Virginia Company. The same way that Israel was formed was a corporation, right? You issue shares. Virginia Company, 1606 or 1607, they were formed, something like that. And in the early 16, it was before, because my family came over with the Virginia Company in 1609, right? With money that had been raised from the same way that they raised money to do East India Company or the British East India Company or the Dutch East India Company. There's these companies all over the world, right? There was these different colonies. The Scottish tried to make one in Darien and they went bankrupt and all this stuff. So I mean, and so all these corporations that they would form, that's how they did it. It was true fascism in a sense because corporations were the ones making the colonies, right? And so my family came over with the Virginia Company. And they got shipwrecked on Bermuda. There was no Indians on Bermuda. It was just a bunch of turtles and birds, right? The ship was called the Sea Venture, and we know it because there was an author on the ship, and my family's names are on there, right? They were the Easons, right? And so that's my mother's side, right? So they were there, and then they made it to Virginia, and they made it to Jamestown in 1610. What I'm getting to is all these companies, like the one that eventually would form Israel. It was a company, right? It was the old formula. But what I'm getting to is all these things that we see now, like BlackRock trying to take the ports that the Chinese companies have in Panama, the two ports on each side of the Panama Canal, Hutchison ports. Chinese have the two key ports. There's 7 ports in Panama Canal, but there's 2 that are super important. One's on the Pacific side and one's on the Atlantic side. I'm at them all the time, right? And China runs them. They don't own them, but they run them, and they'll end up owning them at this rate. And BlackRock, Trump's like, BlackRock will come in and get them, which is obviously a Zionist company, BlackRock, but it's a corporation, right? So it's not like the United States is going to come take them. No, it's like my Zionist buddies are going to come take it, and China's like, not so fast, buddy. And so I was on with Alex Jones the other day, and he's like, well, President Trump's taking back Panama. I'm like, no, he's not. Look at the interview. I'm like, that's bullshit. We're not taking it back. China's not just giving it up. Trump said, give Panama back, and China's like, okay, we'll just sail home. They don't play like that. These are big boys, right? And so they still have those ports. And as of just several hours ago, because I just got a very fresh video, they're working on the bridge as we talk right now, the 4th bridge. And the 4th bridge that the Chinese are working on lands right at the Hutchison port on the Pacific side. I'm there all the time, right? And so at the end of the day, companies are still ruling the world just like they did back then. I mean, these companies that had all these colonies, like let's say the Scottish. The Scottish wanted to make a colony down in Darien in Panama. They tried to make one in the 1690s, right? And they ended up going bankrupt. They lost about 2,000 people dead, right? And so they ended up getting absorbed into United Kingdom in 1707 under the treaties, the Articles of Union, right? And the Articles of Union, 1706 and 1707. They finalized it in 1707, right? So the Articles of Union, Scotland, because they raised up a bunch of money from Scottish people, and they're like, hey, we're going to make a path between the seas in Panama and the Darien, where I'm at all the time. And they did it at this place called Fort Edinburgh, right? And they gave it a shot. And New Caledonia is another. And so they gave it a shot. They went bankrupt, 2,000 dead. And then Scotland was bankrupt. And England said, we'll have you. Took Scotland off the chessboard and made them that. And then the United Kingdom was born, right? Or arguably, what's Great Britain and the United Kingdom, the British are going to start fighting about that. Every time you bring this up, they start like throwing stuff at each other. So, I mean, but in any case, Great Britain their empire continued to grow. They kept trying to take Ireland, never quite succeeded. You know what I mean? Put Ireland into a big famine in the 1840s and 50s, right? More than one, but I mean, the one from 1845-ish to 1850. Well, actually, there's argument about when that famine was, 1848 to 52, whatever. But I mean, I've been over there studying it, and I'm not exactly sure exactly when it started and exactly when it ended. It's a topic for discussion, but at the end of the day, it was a big famine. And the Irish, that was a repopulation move with Ireland, right? That was a reduce the population and make them leave. That's why you ended up with Irish running their gangs in New York, right? So you end up with Irish down in in Australia, and Irish all over the world, in Canada and all that sort of stuff, because they had famine going on. And actually, England was not even allowing us to send ships of food over, right? They were blocking the food from them. They were genociding the Irish. The Victorian famines are quite famous. They did them in Bangladesh. They did them all over the place. They were commonly using famines as a weapon of war, right? That was a normal weapon of war. And that's exactly what Israel's doing right now, using food as a weapon in Gaza. It's a normal weapon. And it's going to end up being a weapon used against us. Big time. I can guarantee you. They're setting conditions. War is all about setting big boy war, doing war the right way. When I say the right way, I mean methodical and strategic and tactical patience, setting all conditions right, which could take years or even generations. If you want to do it and really succeed on the first go, you need to slowly set conditions and, get everything right. Take your time, get it right, get everything right, and then go for it. And then often it's easy if you've exercised strategic patience and tactical patience, and it could take 50 years for setting everything up. It could take longer than that. That's one thing that Israel has nothing of. They don't have any strategic patience. They're like petulant retards, basically, right? I mean, seriously, the things that they do are so self-defeating. They have no patience whatsoever. If they had more patience and they had more, let's say, civility, they would get a lot more of what they seem to want, right? But they don't. They alienate everybody around them. But the English, through time, they could play a more sophisticated symphony. They could play good guy, they could play bad guy, but when they played bad guy, they often did it through other people. One of the ways that the English would use, or say the British would use to take land was, again, to make people think that that's their land. And they would do this all over the world in wars that you've never heard of, right? And little actions that you've never heard of. Trying to get this group to take that group. Resettling the Rohingya over here, all these different groups, right? And it was all this reworking. So people that know how to do this, these aren't common names that you would know. Nobody knows the plumbers' names. Nobody knows the guys that put the plumbing into Los Angeles and built the aqueducts for the Romans. You know what I mean? And these people that do this know how to do it at a big, big level. They know how to plow over populations and put another one in. And that's what's happening now with these so-called migrations. We're being, like, you look at Ireland now. Masako and I went there about 3 years ago. Ireland's essentially about cooked. Luxembourg's gone. I would say Netherlands is already gone. France on the border, but I think it'll tip over as well. There's only a few countries that really stood up for themselves, and that would be like Hungary. We went there looking. Poland, of course. I lived in Poland for a couple of years. They're standing up. Even Finland's not standing up, surprisingly. Japan is actually allowing people to resettle in Japan. There's a whole town there called Kawaguchi Stan. It's called Kawaguchi. It's in Saitama Prefecture, but it's filled with Kurds, right? And, we've been there, Masako and I, and there's Kurds everywhere. There's stuff written in Kurdish, on the signs and everything. That's Japan. Yeah, I hear people all the time say, well, Japan would never do that. And I'm like, get on an airplane. Go look. Right now, there's, Masako, who's right around here somewhere right now. She gave a speech in front of the Prime Minister's house about a month ago before we came over here. And, about how you need to stop this. And he resigned shortly after that. I don't know if it was due to Masako, but people do listen to her. And Masako is the one that started getting the Japanese riled up about the IOM, International Organization for Migration. Masako's been down so much in the Darien Gap and all these different places on the Mexico border, inside Mexico, all over the place. I mean, looking at the invasion through Canada, we've been to all these places together. Luxembourg's gone. Luxembourg now used to be the jewel of Europe. And the first time I went to Luxembourg was when I was, on a Special Forces A team. We were practicing, some war stuff. And, we were there for a couple of weeks and that sort of thing. When we were finished training, the Luxembourgers gave us a tour around Luxembourg. I'm like, wow, this place is awesome. I've never seen a country this nice. And I was stationed in Bad Tolz, Germany, which is a really, really nice place to be stationed. It was super nice, like Disney World. I went to Luxembourg. I'm like, this is like Disney World super, so, but now we went to Luxembourg, maybe 3 years ago, and it's over 50% aliens. It's people shitting on the streets, drug addicts.
That's terrible news. That's terrible news, man. I've heard so much about Luxembourg. I've wanted to go there. It's
gone.
Is that what's happening here? It's gone, and that's what's happening here. And it seems like it's happening all over the world and mostly the West. Is this? What's the long-term plan? Is it the Kalergi plan? Is it just to basically just deculturalize the world and just make us a giant brown blob with no culture, no history, no religion, no families, frankly? Like, what's the big plan here, and what is it specifically in America?
It's happening. I mean, you can see it. Let's look at, there's dope stores all over the place around here. I mean, on the pyramid from 1984, right? You got the alphas and the betas and the gammas and the deltas or whatever, and then the epsilons at the bottom, right? You know what I'm talking about, that pyramid. And the alphas are the ones that rule everything, and that's the ones with high executive function, basically. And then the betas are like basically the generals, let's say, right? And then, or the presidents, that sort of thing. Then you've got the epsilons are the ones that are like, when I say, look, there's dope stores all over the place, they're like, oh, it's freedom, man. That's your epsilons right there, right? Yeah. And, and then when I start to say, actually, have you ever been to a place where they legalized it like Colorado or, because I used to think like an epsilon, like, yeah, it's freedom, just let them do it, and because I'm more libertarian in that regard. But then I start to get to, how they say when you're young, if you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart, and you're old, if you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain. Well, I've bypassed my grandparents at this point. It's like at this point, I'm more conservative than my grandparents, which was pretty doggone conservative. And so, my grandmother used to say, Michael, one day your children will be buying bottled water out of the stores. And I was like, we're never going to buy bottled water out of the stores. And, well, there you go. There's my bottled water. And so, what I'm getting to is these dope stores. That's when, the most, serious weapon in warfare is information war. And a subset of that is psychological operations. And the rocket fuel and the grease of psychological operations is intoxicants, whether that be alcohol or opium or whatever. Dope, cannabis, whatever. The dope heads are always like, you don't even know what dope is. It's like, whatever, man. It's okay, whatever. But that's epsilon talk there. But the intoxicants and music. I'm going somewhere with that. Intoxicants and music, that is your like hypergolic rocket fuel. And the music is highly weaponized, right? And obviously the intoxicants. And that's one of the main ways we defeated Indians. It wasn't with smallpox blankets. That's nonsense. Even if that even occurred, there's a lot of, that probably actually did not actually happen. Although everybody knows it happened. But the smallpox blanket thing, apparently, I think actually never really actually happened. But it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is one of the major weapons that we used against Indians was firewater, right? It was alcohol, right? And it pops up in all my old books all the time. It'll be like over in Formosa, one missionary named McKay, he was from Canada. He was a dentist. And this is the 1890s, I think. And he talked about how the wily Chinese traders were using intoxicants to basically subdue the natives in Formosa, right? But so it's been used all over the world. It's being used right now. 3 years ago, there were no dope stores in Thailand. And now look on Google or look for Google Maps wherever you're at in the world. Look for a dope store right now. Just pull it up on your computer and look for cannabis stores in Bangkok. You're going to see them all over the place. And I've looked at it, and you look at it there, and there's like everywhere, right? But then you go on the ground, there's even more that aren't on the map yet. A lot more. Like I probably saw 10 or 15 today just on a 30-minute walk. Different dope store. There's more dope stores than there are coffee stores and 7-Elevens combined. You know what I mean? There's like they're everywhere. And you go. They say you need a prescription, but we walked into one, and you can get at the cash register. You can get the prescription when you're checking out.
Well, you sent me that picture, and it had all that satanic horse shit. All those pictures.
Yeah, that was in a bookstore, man.
Thing. Oh, that was a bookstore.
That was today. That was like a few hours ago.
You're talking about
those right after we took them. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about degeneracy as a form of control, as a form of political control. And it's not just. I mean, they're all tied together. But also sexual degeneracy, which we talked about in Barnum World a lot. And I had somebody write me. This person, I guess they're homosexual, whatever, and they're like, "You attacked us personally, and we're not bad people, and we're blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "You're not understanding the point I'm making. I understand in the human race, there's going to be a percentage of people that like the same sex. I get it. They're taking that and using that to create sexual degeneracy, which reduces families.
I gotta watch Barnum World. I haven't watched it yet. Yeah,
it's a form of political control. It's a form of control, right?
100%. I mean, because that's the exact same argument that dopers use. They're like, "Well, you're attacking my freedom, man." It's like, what freedom? You're a slave. In fact,
that's right.
In 1879, Grant was talking about how addiction is basically just slavery. President Grant. Well, he was not president anymore, but he's talking about it in volume 29 of his letters. I've got all 32 volumes of his letters. In volume 29, he's talking about how addiction is just like it destroys cultures and people, right? That's 1879, right? It's like, I mean, this is old. And the epsilon level is always, oh, what about alcohol, man? What about this? What about that? And I'm like, that too, right? It's all used. And this music, they're on this river right here, the Cha Phraya River. You know, all these tour boats going up and down playing. Luckily, these glass doors are like very sound resistant. Otherwise, you'd hear these loud, crazy music, and these people are on these boats dancing like crazy, playing, Van Halen and crap, jumping around and, just drunk and acting like idiots. And what I'm getting to is you well know your prefrontal cortex is not going to work when you're all this crazy, disjointed music and intoxicants of whatever sort. You're easy to hijack. You're easy to say, take the jab. You're easy to push into anything because you're no longer in your executive functioning brain. All they have to do is take you out of the executive function mode of your brain, which with disjointed music and intoxicants got you. You're trapped. They've got you, and now they can insert into your ear the USB with the new message, right? All right, we got you. Here you are, and we've loaded you with new firmware, and now here you are. You're our meat bot now. Go to war for us.
Yeah. So where is this going? Where in your prediction, in 30 years, what does this place look like? I think that America's breaking up in the 2030s. I don't think Israel exists anymore. It's just my prediction. What that looks like. I mean, would it be secession and great? I don't know. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, clearly the United States is breaking up. I mean, that's obvious. You have to.
So you're with me. You're with me on that. You agree with me on that.
I've been saying it for years, and
Okay.
and I've been saying it very clearly for years in writing, and at first when I would say this, people would get like, "What are you, anti-American?" I'm like, that'd be like saying I'm pro-cancer. Let's say if I'm an oncologist and I say, "Hey, so and so has cancer," and you're like, "What are you, pro-cancer?" I'm like, "No, I'm saying you need to get it treated, or you're going to die." Right? That's
exactly.
What I'm
I say this like you're speaking my language so much. That's exactly what I say. People say, "Oh, we're not breaking up. You're not getting." I'm like, dude, you don't understand. You're occupied right now by a very evil entity. Okay, that's not. The country wasn't founded so we could have this massive federal government lording over you with a boot on your neck. That's not America. I'm American. That's the United States regime. That's not me. We're not. We didn't go to war and we didn't do this. They did that. I'm American. It's a completely different thing. So Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I get so much shit for that. And it's like, you don't understand what I'm actually saying and what I'm actually hoping for. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's like we're on a different frequency on the radio here. It's like,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I totally get it. And Misako and I were talking, it's funny when Doug Casey and Misako and I were watching your movie first time in Thailand, we all had the same conclusion, was like, we're on the same wavelength with that guy. We didn't know you at that point, but now, you got to go on his show, man, with the Doug Casey and Matt Smith.
Yeah,
but
I want to get him on.
I mean, we're like, man, if I could make a movie, it would be that one. It's like, and I totally get it, right? I mean, it's extremely well done. And the Jones Plantation.
Thank you.
And where is it going? It's clearly war. I mean, the whole Jones Plantation is about that, right? It's about the techniques and tactics they're using. I mean, you get it. The mechanics of how this machine works. And so for you, it's obviously second nature, or you couldn't have made that film at all. But when it comes to most people, again, if you point out, like you said, the homosexual thing, or when I point out the music thing, or the drugs,
tranny thing, the trans thing.
Oh yeah. And when it comes down to the drugs, they get stuck on, or let's say Trump. I warned about Trump. That guy Newt Gingrich called me up 10 years ago, right? And I was at my office. At that time, my office was in Thailand, actually, and it was in Chiang Mai. And he calls me up, and I'm like, how'd you get my number? Anyway, it was him, and so and he was trying to get support for Trump. Right. And I'm like, Trump, I'm not going to vote for any of those Clinton people. But I mean, seriously, Trump, I mean, don't you have somebody else? I mean, that guy's not even serious. This is like 10 years ago. Right. I'm talking with Newt Gingrich. Right. And I guess he was scratching me off the list of supporters. And but, at the end of the day, I'm like, I mean, we need a serious person. Obviously. Listen, how did I spot Trump so clearly? It's easy. You can spot people that are very similar to you. Like when I watched your movie, I'm like, that guy gets it. We're on the same frequency. You know what I mean? Tune in Tokyo, got it, right? But with Trump, he's my opposite. So you can spot your same and you can spot your opposite instantly. Trump is my opposite. He's like a photo negative of my behavior, right? So when I look at Trump, how is he so easy to predict? I just imagine what I would do and pick the opposite. And that's what he does. He's highly predictable. And look at it again, anything that I've written or said about Trump, I've lost so many readers and supporters. And I'm like, I don't care. Full steam ahead. I sleep at night, right? I don't sleep rich at night because I've created so many enemies, right? It's like, like Alex Jones, had me on the show the other day, but wouldn't have me on the next day. I totally get it. I get it. But I sleep at night, and there are some people that do get it. And those people are the ones that we need to reach. But you can see yourself. You can see people that are very similar to you, whatever language they speak, by their behavior. And you can see your opposite. Trump is my absolute opposite. He is treasonous. He's a coward. And remember, cowards are natural traitors. Cowardice contains the germ of treason, right? And you'll never see a coward that is not a born traitor, because as soon as they get scared, they're going to sell you out. They're going to go to the, and that's why, by the way, a lot of these Anthro-Insula, which means the human islands, these cultures that live amid other cultures, when some country gets invaded, and let's say there's another subculture that lives in there, and the invaders come in, let's say the Armenians in Turkey, right? So the Russians come in, and then the Armenians side with the Russians, and then the Turkish then genocide the Armenians. Now, I've been to Armenia. I've heard the Armenian side of the story quite a lot, and I've been to their genocide museum and in Armenia, in Yerevan, and all that, and I've heard their side many times in Glendale, California, and whatnot, where there's a lot of Armenians out there. I've been to Glendale. I
used to live right down the
times.
street from there. I used to hang out with those guys. I love those Armenians.
Yeah.
I used to go to.
I do too.
Go
Armenians are
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I recommend
ahead,
it for vacation. I would go to Armenia tomorrow. I mean, and the Zionists are selling weapons to the Azeris to kill the Christian Armenians, by the way. And it's the Muslim Iranians who are defending the Christian Armenians from the Zionists. You can't make up this stuff. So the Zionists are actually supplying weapons to the Azeri Shia. The Azeris are Shia Muslims. But the Shia Muslim Iranians are defending the Christian Armenians from the Zionists supplied weapons to the other Shia. Again, it's, on the ground. It's about routes and resources. It's about the.
What's no accident that the UFC had one of their fights recently in Azerbaijan, because the UFC is controlled by Zionists now. I don't know if you know that.
Look at that dopehead Joe Rogan, right? And so coincident, right? Maybe. And so the at the end of the day, well, anyway, I don't know where we're going with all that, but you can see that we're in a state of war, and it's only going to increase. I was talking about Anthro Insula, how these human islands get genocided. Like, you'll have a subculture within a larger culture. A war happens, and then that subculture sides with the interloper. Right now, if the interloper wins, the subculture may or may not survive. It depends on whether the new winner wants them to survive or not, right? Mm-hmm. But if they fail, then that subculture who sided with the invaders, they're going to get killed. I've seen this over and over and over in history, right? If you side with the invaders, at the end of the day, you're going to get genocided, right? So when I talk with Turkish, I spent, significant time in Turkey and up in Armenia, talking with both quite a lot. So I asked the Turkish, what happened with the Armenians? They're like, oh, this is what happened. The Armenians used to live here. They lived here for a long time. And then we got invaded, and they sided with the invaders, so we killed them, right? Now, the Armenians say, we were there, and then the Muslims killed us, right? I mean, that's the basis. You've heard the story, right? So I'm like, when you go to Poland. I lived in Poland for 2 years, right? And Poland is a place where there was a lot of the Jews, like Maliakovsky was from there. Netanyahu, Maliakovsky, right? So the Jews are constantly saying, "Oh, we got all these bad things happened to us in Poland." You ask the Polish people. Or next door in Lithuania, I went to the Holocaust Museum in Lithuania a few years ago, in the capital of Lithuania, there, Vilnius, and I went to that. And you ask the Lithuanians, or you ask the Polish, they're like, yeah, well, the Jews came up here from Sephardic Jews or whatever from Spain or whatever centuries ago, and we all lived happily ever after until the Russians came or the Nazis came, depending on the case, and they sided with them, so we killed them, right? And so it's the same story over and over. It doesn't matter if it's Jews, it doesn't matter if it's Armenians. One side of the story is, hey, they killed us because they didn't like us, and the other side is like, no, you sided with the space aliens, right? And then we beat the space aliens, and then we killed you too, right? We don't want you here anymore because the last time this happened, you ended up being an infection, right? And so so there's two sides of this story, right? And now the United States is filled with these Anthro Insula, human islands, these Anthro Insula of Somalis and everybody else. They're not going to side with us. They're going to side with whoever comes in. They're going to side with the Chinese. They're going to side with whoever is in power, and they're going to side with them to destroy us, and then they'll be destroyed. That's how this works. You'll use the interloper to destroy the main structure, and then they destroy them too, right? Like what's happening in Israel right now. Like you mentioned that you thought Israel may not exist in the future, and like in the not too distant future. I've said that many, many times. Now it may or may not. If I were to bet, I would bet that it's not going to. I would bet that it's not going to survive. 20 years. That's pretty long window for Israel to survive at this rate, right? I mean, it could be. Something could happen in the next 20 months. I don't know. These things are highly unpredictable. But at the end of the day, they have so many enemies now, and they seem to be intentionally creating them, and they are fractured from within. Anthropologically, they're very divided within themselves. They're not a monolithic. They're not a bunch of Jews of one tribe or anything like that. They're different languages. They're different. They fight each other. You got different brands of Orthodox. You got all this different stuff.
I follow a thing on Twitter. The Torah Jews, they hate Israel. They're like anti-Zionist, like hardcore. Like this.
I talk with them all the time, Judaism. Man.
Oh yeah,
I get messages from them every day, and I'm telling you, those guys in the Zionists, they mix like hot and cold air. It's a tornado, right? And they hate each other, and they've hated each other since the beginning. And like for instance, in World War II. Jews and Zionists were killing each other. And there were Jews that were Nazis, and there were Zionists that were Nazis, right? And keep in mind, obviously, some Zionists are Jews. Many Zionists in the United States, most seem to be Christians. That's an extremely safe bet. In the United States, Zionist Christians, Schofield Bible and all that appears to be, I don't know what the ratio is, but it's something ridiculous, like maybe 10-1 or something, or 20-1. I don't even know, but it's some very much larger. That's what Charlie Kirk was there to do. He was there to herd and propagate and grow Christian Zionist, Judeo.
What an incredible psyop that is. That's such a Judeo-Christian values. How could you have Judeo-Christian? How can you have a religion where your Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ? There's a group of people that kill him, say he's rotting in a pit of feces for eternity, and somehow you have Judeo-Christian values. I mean, what an incredible psyop. That's a really incredible. That whole dispensationalism thing. I mean, it's such a great psyop.
Well, the Jones Plantation, man, your movie. It's like it's all about how you can just like, I'll come in and these are not the droids you're looking for. I mean, hey, you remember the guy, that scene in your movie where they're standing upstairs and he's like, "Can I put my face on the money?" And he's like, "Don't you have any sympathy for these idiots or something?"
Yeah.
Yes, like
I put my face on him. I wrote that line, by the way. I'm proud of that line because it was funny.
That's perfect, man. We replayed that. We're like, okay, stop, replay that thing.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? You need to have like a role of, that's going to end up being a cult movie in and of itself. You're going to end up people running around and like getting tattoos of it or something, You got to not let that happen, but
I hope so. No, let them do it. Let them do it. Get tattoos. Go ahead. Well, so we were talking about war. So you think there's going to be a hot war in America between the Americans and the placed migrant people, or like what's going to happen here?
There's quite a few structures. One is Mexicans, of course, with Reconquista, and the Raza as well, right? The race, and so there's a lot of There's that, and then there's the Chinese that are coming in strong across America, right? There's those, and also in Chinese and Indians in Canada are thick, right? And also Indians as well in America, right? I deal with Indians like every single day, actually. Just like I deal with Jews every day, I deal with Indians and Chinese every single day, right? I deal with people all over the world, and quite closely with some of them. And Indians are just flooding in. Like Masako and I, we went up to, we flew from Bahamas. We were looking at the Chinese thing there. We went up to Canada. We went to Toronto, and at Toronto, at the airport, when you land, they have a welcome center for the Ukrainians in the airport. So we stayed up in this town called it's near Toronto. Anyway, there's a big Hindu temple there with a big giant Hanuman monkey statue out there, giant big. You can see it in the newspapers. It was freaking. It's like, I don't know. It's like 100 feet tall or something, maybe taller. It's big, man. And so we went inside that temple, and we're talking with them and that sort of thing. But just down the road from that Hindu temple with the giant Hanuman, you can find it in the news. If you'll see pictures of it, it's giant. It scared the locals when they put it up, the big giant, Hanuman monkey. And it is pretty scary if you don't know what you're looking at. And it's even more scary if you do know what you're looking at. But it's about power and conquest. But down the road from that is a Sikh temple. So we went down there as well. So now you got the Sikhs and the Hindus fighting each other in Canada, and the Sikhs and the Sikhs and the Hindus and the Chinese and Chinese fighting each other. And keep in mind, our wars that we were having in Europe, Europeans came to the Americas, and we just started fighting the same fights over here I'm in Thailand now, but we started fighting the same fights across the United or America that we were having in Europe, right? So you transplant your wars. You're going to end up with African wars in Canada. You're going to end up with African wars in Ireland, in United States. It's going to be Africans fighting each other for some war that they were having back in Somalia or Nigeria, right? It'll be like Igbo versus Hausa tribe or something, right? Or it'll be, it'll be Baluch people versus Pashtun and Hazar and that sort of thing. All these people I was out with in their countries, right? And some fish don't mix well in the same aquarium. So they're filling our aquarium, and nobody has stopped them. Trump hasn't stopped them. Trump is totally down with it. Again, Trump, I think probably when you look at how bad he is actually my exact opposite on personality-wise, right? So I can predict what he's going to do, and it's going to be straight up evil, right? I mean, because all I have to do is go, what would I do? And that means he's going to do genocide against Americans, right? And because he's going to do the opposite. And like he's, just joined up with Pfizer and he's doing Trump RX apparently, right?
I posted on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so
Anthony Bourla's a great guy. Pfizer did a great job. Just a great job during the pandemic. I'm like, this guy Bourla, if we were a serious country, he would be publicly hung.
Yeah, but the Epsilons out there, the Epsilons are like, well, Fauci fooled Trump. Here we are in October of 2025.
Yeah.
Fauci fooled him. Well, who did you want, Biden? Do you want Biden or do you want, Trumpy Bear? Trumpy Bear is here to save us. Trumpy Bear, listen, Trumpy Bear said, here, rockabye baby, here, stick your tongue out, here's some poison, right? That's what happened with Trumpy Bear. You had millions of people jabbing their own children, right? You had people actually jabbing their children and putting it on Instagram, right? That's like Aztec child sacrifice, right? I mean, crap like that. That's like out of the movies. That's cult stuff severe, right? And so what do I think is going to happen? I mean, Trump is straight up he's Zionist, man. And when he has fights with Netanyahu, it's over probably strategy. It's not over whether or not we should be doing it. It's probably about who's getting the most gold. I mean, look at Trump laying out the gold in the White House before
disgusting.
Netanyahu.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
that was some serious. That was just what's going on in this country, and they try to tell people that the inflation's 3%. Like we're retarded. Like I can't go to the grocery store and see meat's twice as expensive as it was a couple of years ago.
What's the gold price today? 3,700.
It's like, and he's putting gold statues in, and people still they can't see through it. It's a thing you talked about earlier, where and I think it's really important, where if you start getting religious about your beliefs, you're gonna end up in the wrong place. But I think there might be something to where people are literally just NPCs, and so when they're presented with new information, they can't change their mind. They're programmed NPCs. Could they get deprogrammed? I don't know, but we're not NPCs because we can be presented with new information, and sometimes it's painful. It was very painful for me to let go of the bullshit that I was told my whole life about how America was the freest machine ever free. Yeah, it was like losing a girlfriend that I was in love with, but I did it because it was the truth. Yeah. And I think NPCs they can't change their opinion. They can't change their mind because they're programmed, and they get angry at you, and they get mad at you as if you're there's something in their programming just it malfunctions, and they can't change their mind. I don't know.
What's interesting though is that this isn't a bad thing. The anger actually is not totally bad. The anger is an indication they actually see it. They're resisting it. It's painful. It's because, they're angry at the pain. So that's actually can be a good sign if you can get through that anger, because the other, otherwise they're just like, oh, just get out of here. You're a nutcase, right? They're not even angry with you. They're just like totally dismissive. But if they're angry, you actually hit the nerve. So if we can find a way to like, okay, we got anger. That's good. There's a life force in there that we need to, free that life force because we want them on our side, right? We want people seeing it for what it's worth.
You make a good point. Maybe the better way to define it is they hate me. There's a difference between anger and hating me. You know what I mean? Like I'm evil.
That's important.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Hate is a combination of two emotions, right? And I've studied this quite a lot in information war, because when you're like, I've gone into museums all over China and whatnot. I'm like, how do they make them hate Japanese or whatever? And how do you make somebody hate somebody? You need to combine two emotions. Those two emotions are fear and anger, right? Fear and anger. If you mix fear and anger, you'll get hatred, right? It's like mixing hydrogen and oxygen and you get water, right? 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, and that's it. You got you some water, steam, right? And likewise with hatred. Now, you can get angry at somebody, but you're not disgusted with them. So you don't, and so your anger, calms down. And you're like, okay, we're still friends, but hey, don't do that again. It's like,
right.
Or you can get disgusted, like, I can't believe you just did that. But I'm not angry, and I'm just like, don't do that again. But when you intentionally combine anger, how do you create that? One of the ways to do that is to show your enemies doing atrocities. That's why atrocity porn is so powerful, because hatred, when you combine anger and disgust into hatred, that is your rocket fuel for war, right? When you want to do war, that's why atrocity porn is so effective. It creates hatred, right? So rape, killing children, killing babies. That's why you always see these photos of babies getting stabbed with bayonets and stuff, and so many different wars. It's the same image over and over and over, right? It's the bayonets and babies, right? It's things like that.
Israel did it, not to cut you off, but Israel did the same thing with the babies in the ovens and the decapitated babies, which was all bullshit. For October 7th, it just happened recently. They did the same thing with Iraq with the babies in the pulling the babies out of the incubators. The freaking, what was it, World War I, the Huns, and they were, killing babies with the bayonets. But yeah, go ahead. You're right.
That's it, because that makes people incredibly angry. You're like, you're killing kids, you're stabbing them with knives, I'll kill you. You know what I mean? Because that makes us hate them. That goes from, hey, he's probably a nice guy, to, wait, he just stabbed a baby, I'll kill him, right? It goes like from zero to that instantly, right? And so that's why the information warriors, when you're getting ready to create a war, like right now in China, I've been watching this for years. They're setting the information ground to do war with Japan, right? Clear, and the United States. It's less obvious than what they're doing with the United States. But with Japan, it's amazingly obvious when you go to the museums in China, right? If you go to the Nanjing Museum, it's all about hate, all about hate. And it's interesting, the psychological operations going on in that museum. When I went to Nanjing to that museum, it's a huge museum, right? And there was many dozens of buses of Chinese kids showing up. I was the only white guy there, right? And so there was all these buses, with the teacher with the red flag and the teacher with the green flag and the white flag. So all these different students going through the museum. What's interesting is everything is perfectly lighted so that your phones can take perfect pictures. You're allowed to video, photo, all you want. Everywhere you turn, 300,000, 300,000, 300,000, 300,000. Everywhere was 300,000, because they're saying that the Japanese killed and raped 300,000 Chinese in Nanjing. Everywhere. Every time you look anywhere, you will always, for hours. So we're going through the museum, and I'm like, at one point, I knew, I was there studying information war, so I knew what's going on. I'm like, wow, they're really creating anger and disgust here, lots of it. Hypergolically, like hypergolic rocket fuel, right? But one of the other techniques that they were using is the museum was very big. When we were about halfway through, I'm like, man, I'm glad this museum's done. This is like getting tiring, and the kids are getting grouchy around me. I don't speak Mandarin, but they were, obviously getting grouchy. There's so many kids everywhere, and so keep going through, and I'm 300,000, 300,000, 300,000. There's no water fountains here. Kids are thirsty, getting grouchy. Because when you want to imprint a feeling into somebody, you make them feel that, be thirsty, tired, irritable, and you keep showing the face of your enemy. And, you want them, like, if you want to go on a date and you want to, woo a woman that you want to marry, you want to get her a great meal and everything's perfect, everything smells good, you know what I mean? You want her to imprint on you all the good things, right? But if you want hatred, it's the opposite, right? You want to, those kids, by the time they ended that museum, they were very irritable. And it was all about Japanese 300,000, 300,000, 300,000. And they're running them through there on an industrial scale. And we've seen museums like this around the world, where they running through kids from schools. They show up on buses. They go through the museum. You get your imprinting. And it's, often it's these giant museums where they're very tired when it's over. So there's many aspects to it, right? And so, that's why I wrote a dispatch on this called The Hate Farm. It's called The Hate Farm, and the subtitle is something like China is planting a bitter harvest or something like that. I published that like 10 years ago or something when I was in Nanjing. So, but it's called The Hate Farm, right? So it's very important to watch when somebody's trying to create hatred, right? And it's interesting because Israel, the Zionists know this very well, how to create hatred, because they do it all the time. But they appear to be doing it to themselves. They know what they're doing. They know killing Charlie Kirk would make a lot of people hate him. They know bombing all these countries simultaneously would make them hate him. You see that report that some Israeli IDF officer was yelling inside, Pentagon, while a thing was going on recently. Just like it's hard to tell if it's just part of their firmware to make people hate them, or, because of the professional victim thing, but the Zionists seem to be causing the world to hate them. Maybe this is casus belli so that they'll have reason to use nuclear weapons. Like, I would not be surprised at all if Israel nuked the United States. And, of course, they're going to blame it on Iran. And then the United States will dutifully go ahead and nuke Iran, right? I mean, I would not doubt that at all. I would not doubt at all. There's nothing for anybody that'll do those mass death jabs and all these other things. There's nothing off the table for those people. Nothing. Hey, Matt, I'm on with Drew right now. We're talking about Jones Plantation and other stuff. Man, you got to interview him. It's pretty awesome. We're just taking a quick break. This is for Matt Smith. You know, Matt, he's awesome, man. I tell you what, that dude's smart.
Yeah, that's the guy. He's sending me a copy of Doug's new book.
I've only read the first chapter so far, but it was very well written.
I love the concept. I wish I had that book when I was a kid, because
Exactly.
I'm a product of, ethnically cleansed American broken home shit. And I don't know my dad. I knew him when I lost touch with him after I was 12, and it wasn't a good situation in the first place. So I didn't have any guidance at all when I was a kid. So if I had known somebody like that or seen that, it wasn't in the cards. It is what it is. But if I still hold out slim hope that I might get married and have another kid someday. I really want to have a son. That's the kind of thing that I want him to read. I wonder, is it just for young boys, the book? I mean, I guess I'll read it when he gets it, but when it gets
I've only read the first chapter, but I mean, the premise is solid. I mean, it's about the problem that so many people, especially young men, have, is that they have been the subject. You want to actually make this part of the talk? This is important. Right, let's do it. So let's talk about that book. Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Let's. How do we preface this? All right, we're back. We took a break, and we're going to talk now about Doug Casey's new book and why it's important.
Yeah, Doug Casey and Matt Smith. Again, Doug Casey is the one that introduced me to the Jones Plantation. He's a very famous speculator and just pretty much serious man of mystery. We spent Masako and I spent a month running around Thailand with him, and then we were down there in Argentina with him, staying with him actually. And he's a super smart guy, and he wrote this book with Matt Smith to help Matt's son Max Smith, to find his way in this world without going to university. Like who would want to go to Harvard today and rack up $60,000 a year in student debt, or however much it costs to go to that clown show, right? I mean, at this point, what good is a current degree? Like when you read the first chapter of Doug and Matt's book, it says, basically a university degree these days, it's only worth something for your first job, because after your first job, people are only asking you about your last job, right? They want to know what your last job was, not, so for your first job, you need a degree, but for your second job, they want to know what your last job was. You know what I mean? And anyway.
Well, the other thing is, not to cut you off, but the other thing is, you mentioned Harvard. I mean, you could maybe make an argument for Harvard just because of the cachet, but the majority of kids are going to like Florida State or something. And it's like, it's completely pointless. I mean, they've made it so easy to get loans, which is just a hedge fund scam. They've made the loan money. You can't file for bankruptcy, so you're enslaved to that debt for the rest of your life, and you're getting a degree that everybody else has. It's useless. It's unnecessary. You can learn everything you need to learn in the actual physical world. But go ahead. I cut you off.
Yeah, the reason Harvard came to mind was because somebody a few hours ago sent me something about some new professor or program at Harvard. It's the normal, idiocy LGBTQ crap, right?
Okay.
Anyway, that's why Harvard even came to my mind. I'm like, well, there you go again.
No, it's a good point though.
Yeah, exactly. So the book is about basically Max, who has a Substack, Max Smith, which is Matt's son. So here to say again, Doug Casey and Matt Smith wrote this book called The Preparation, right? And Max Smith, who is Matt's son, who's about 20 or 21 now, is actually going through this preparation, they call it. And basically, the first part of the preparation is he went through EMT training, right? So he's doing real stuff with real men and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's gone and sailed around the tip of South America and all firefighting, woodland firefighting, and all kinds of stuff. So he's doing man stuff, right? and he's where you have to get dirty and you have to learn stuff. And if you make a mistake, guess what? You could die doing this, right? I mean, that's man stuff, right? And so that, you get this sense of seriousness and you're learning very important things and you're learning things you could never get in school, right? Going out to, see things. And so the preparation is about how to get this, spend a few years of your life going through preparation for the rest of your life so that you've seen enough of different things so that you're not getting surprised by everything, right? That comes at you. You're not coming at something going, wow, I don't know how to get my way out of this. You know what I mean? Because since you've gone through the preparation, you're like, well, I never expected this to happen, but I remember when I was an EMT in that fire, I can get through this somehow. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Basically, the positive attitude, the right skill set to get you on your right way to solve problems, right? And so, and without getting through without any student debt. The reason I have no debt at all, I have zero student debt, no debt. I'd gotten out of the Army. I was in special forces and that sort of stuff. So I started going to school, right? And the next thing you know, I'm working for Michael Jackson, doing security for Michael Jackson in California, right? And so I was doing my calculus homework because I wanted to always be a physicist or an engineer, right? And actually, I wanted to be a physicist. But I thought I should go into engineering so I could do some other things related to physics. Anyway, so I'm sitting there so I had some decent math skills. Let's put it that way. That's what I'm getting to. So I'm at Neverland at, Michael Jackson's crib. And I'm doing my calculus homework one night. And I'm like, you know what? If I take loans to go to Cal Poly and that sort of thing, how am I ever going to get out of this? I mean, I could do the math. I'm like, let me do it differently. Let me try some different variables here. I'm just like, how did all those engineers make so much money? Because things seem to have changed, right? There's no chance that these numbers just aren't adding up. So I was like, well, and you know what? I was born to be wild. So I went back overseas and I started a company in Poland, right? And I don't have any student debt now, right? So I went back over, I'd been a Green Beret before and spent 5 years in the Army and that sort of stuff. So my preparation was basically running around doing Green Beret stuff, right? And so that was actually more contained than what Max Smith is doing. He's just doing Call of the Wild. He'll probably be up in Alaska fishing for crabs or something soon. I don't know what he'll be doing. Maybe hunting bears or running beaver traps or something. But the thing is he's doing man stuff. And it's the sort of skill set. There's this other group, and it's in Texas. What's it called? Good Lord. Chuck Colton brought some of these kids down. Not kids, they're young men. He brought them down to Darien Gap. And it's called the... anyway, I'll think of it. It's this academy, and it takes young men, and some of the skills that you learn is EMT stuff, and you also learn how to pilot an aircraft, and you actually get a license. You learn how to scuba dive. That's what Max has done too, and you become scuba certified. You learn how to do water rescue. That's one of the things I think. Anyway, this what's this academy called? Anyway, so they actually teach them how to build a house, right? You have to make the plan. You have to make the budget. You have to make the foundation. You have to go buy the stuff, right? It's like, and you have to lay the foundation and build it. I mean, really, no kidding, build a house with plumbing and the electric and all this stuff, right? So in a small house, you're not building, some ranch or something, but the point is you're getting them to do man stuff where you actually have to do this, right? And so he brought some of those young men down to the Darien when we were doing something down there. They're all about, I don't know, late teens or 20, 21-ish. And they were serious young guys. I was like, wow, this is good material. I don't know. These guys, they were like, we were out at this village with Imbra Indians way out in the jungle. And this is the reason we're out there is because this is where the invasion's happening with, all these people from coming in through, they're just coming out of the jungle after a week or two in the jungle, right? And there's people coming out of there dying, right? So we're in this Imbra village, and the Doctors Without Morals had abandoned their post, so we just took over their doctor post, right? In this village called Bajo Chiquito. So it's called Bajo Chiquito. So we're in Bajo Chiquito, and we're in the Doctors Without Morals post. And, there's literally people dying of heat stroke, right? And Chuck Colton's carrying this girl. She looks like she's almost dead. So all we had was these young men that were going to this, what's the name of that academy? Anyway, it's in Texas. If I find it, I'm going to send you the link. And so I just started giving them orders like, you go find me a fan and get me some water and all this stuff. And then next thing you know, they're just all taking charge, man, these young men. It was perfect. I mean, that's the way it was the whole trip. These young men that had been, getting proper man training over in Texas, they show up down into the jungle. They're not a fish out of water. Okay, I've never been in this jungle before type stuff. They got over that in like 5 minutes. You know what I mean? They adjusted to it. They adjusted to their new environment. When we had these people coming in that were really actually dying of heat stroke and that sort of thing, they jumped right on it, started helping, and then when it came time to leave the jungle, it was a very long boat ride out of the jungle and all that. They're fine, And so, I mean, this is the thing. And when you have young men who have proper men around them, alpha men, they're teaching them how to do man stuff where you can actually get hurt or killed too. This is no joke. You might take some attrition in this sort of stuff, right? And but at the end of the day, they've gone through their rite of passage. I mean, the stuff that Max Smith is doing. He's a young man. He's going through the preparation. He can definitely get killed doing that stuff. No question about it. And you know what? And when he makes it through, he'll be a man, right? And he'll be useful to other men and teams or himself and a family, that he'll be confident when he's got a wife he's got to take care of. You know what I'm saying? He'll be a man that she can trust, right? I mean, that's what we need. We need young men getting that sort of mentorship from actual men, not people that are talking about how, dope is freedom and all that crap and watching idiots like Joe Rogan talk about LSD. You know what? We need men that know how to do man stuff.
Well, that's what when we talked about the tools that they use, the degeneracy, what you just talked about, the getting you high and drunk and all this stuff. This is another one of their major tools, is so-called education, where they've conned kids into believing that, first of all, it's an old-fashioned way to learn anyway now with the internet, but to go and sit in a classroom and listen to some bozo talk to you and tell you what you should think and get some degree that in a classroom where you have no hands-on experience. I mean, there's probably still some degrees that have some use to them, some of the farming degrees and stuff like that, but the engineering, but it's another tool of control where you have all these kids running around. Their minds have been, it's actually very deleterious, I think, going to university, not only financially, but spiritually and mentally, to have these people teaching you and telling you these things and creating this world around you that you think exists. It doesn't actually exist. It only exists in your mind. And then you create this terrible life for yourself. And it's a really powerful form of control. And that brings me back to, we were talking about before we went on break, was the Trump thing. And you were talking about, control of people's minds through hate and fear. What is Trump's angle here? What is the Zionist angle here? Is it they're just short-term thinkers? Because it seems to me like, obviously they're invading us with this mass migration and population replacement. It seems like that seems to be the most powerful tool. What is the game here? Are they, because is it just the economy so fake and financialized that they have to have just replacement cheap labor because they can't actually pay an actual salary to people because they wouldn't be in business? Or is it they're just short-term thinkers? Or is it there's a long-term play here? They hate Christians. What is going on, in your opinion?
It's a multiplayer game. By the way, the name of that academy is called the Alert Academy. The Alert Academy.
All right, I'll put the link in the show notes.
I don't know anybody there. The only thing I saw was the young men that they were still in the Alert Academy, but I was like, okay, these are studs. Whatever they're doing there is working. Do more of it. It's like, proceed.
Shout out to the Alert Academy. Yeah,
exactly. I don't even know who owns the thing or how they run it. But those young men were Johnny on the spot. But what's going on here on the big picture? What's going on the big picture is it's a multiplayer game. I mean, the Chinese have got their own game going. They want to rule the world. There's many globalists. It's not like the Chinese suddenly wanted to rule the world, but everybody else was innocent. I mean, there's a lot of people that have wanted to rule the world. Catholics, Muslims, Jews. You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of people want to rule the world. The British Empire, the Portuguese, the Spanish, long list, right? And everybody wants to rule the world. Here we are. So Now, there are some people that just want to burn the world down, like Joker. I mean, there's truth in that statement, right? They just, for whatever reason, and there's people that just want a big piece of the world or whatever, and so it's a multiplayer game. So it's not like it's one person or group that's running this. It's a jungle. It's a lot of people with a lot of different, like when you go to a war, if you go to let's say the Iraq war where I spent 2 years, and they'll say this war is about oil or whatever. Well, for some people it is. For other people it's about, and they want metals. And at the low level, at the epsilon level, it's about, whatever, But if you at the higher levels, it's going to be about routes and resources. Oil, yes, but also about eventually going for Iran and taking charge of Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, if we had succeeded in Iraq and Afghanistan, you actually could have taken Iran. And build up armies there. If you have strategic patience and you do it slow as smooth, right? Just slow, chill out, right? And really stop dropping bombs all over the place in a hurry, because it ends up not working, right? And but had we gone slow, we probably would still be in there building up armies. We probably actually would. Had we been very easy, right? But that's not what happened. We went in there like a bunch of crazy monkeys from the Wicked Witch or whatever, right? And the people, people showed up from all around the world to fight us. Now there are different people that want different things, of course. Some people, contractors, just want to make money, right? And so some people want to watch the United States expend itself, right? For whatever reason, right? There's so many players doing so many different things. So, what's this war about? It depends on who you ask. It depends on which, facet of the diamond you look in to see, what it's going to look like on the other side.
So is Trump just this is kind of what I think of him. He's just kind of a selfish boob kind of guy. That's
Trump to me is like I said, Trump is my actual opposite, right? I mean, he's my, I can see his skeleton. You know what I mean? I can see right through that guy, right? It's like I've got an x-ray for him. I might pick anything I've written, which will be thousands of things. Just use AI and say, generalize what's Michael Yon said. Find something that Michael Yon said positive about Trump, right? And I'd say things like, well, it appears that he did a good job raising his family. You know what I mean? I would say things like that to show that I'm not completely insane by saying this guy's a traitor. You know what I'm saying? But he his family wears nice shoes. At the end of the day, Trump, to me, he's like a boy in a man's body. He never grew up, right? He's not been through an alert academy. He's not been through man stuff. He's always been the boy with the golden spoon, 24 karat, right? He's always been, everybody's been there at his beck and call. The poorest day of his life was, his money problems have been, he didn't have enough billions of dollars to do something. He's never had a $50 problem. He's never, when you're somebody that has a $50 problem or a $5 problem because you don't have money to put gas in the tank, so you're eating ramen noodles and that sort of stuff, or it's even worse, that's a more serious problem, like a medical problem you can't pay for, and somebody in your family may actually die because you don't have enough money, right? There's people like that right now all over the world, right? Trump's never seen that. What's his biggest stress, right? He didn't have enough billions of dollars. He's always been in the driver's seat. He's a boy. He's a boy in a man's body. He's the perfect stooge for more sophisticated players. Just because he's older doesn't mean he's more mature. He's just not. He's just an old boy. He's an old child, right? He's a child in a man's body. And when you look at how impetuous he is, how he just lacks, he'll just do anything. Like, he'll stomp his feet like a little boy. But now he's got generals that he can throw into battle, right? And that sort of thing. And so but he's a perfect stooge. And I think, obviously when they're raising people up and nurturing, he didn't just start from scratch. I mean, he's been inside that ecosystem since day one, right? He's not a self-made man. He was born rich. He was born amazingly rich. He's always been amazingly rich. And, and what did he do? He ran casinos and that sort of thing. So he knows how to defraud people, right? That's, the casinos are all about taking people in who have a gambling habit, just like the dope in the bars are about people that have other habits, and milking them dry. That's what it's about, right? And it's the bottom line. He's always been milking people like cattle, right? And so at the end of the day, that's what he is. That's his nature. He's a predator, right? And notice when he's running for president, he's like, nobody's ever been treated as badly as I have. I've been treated worse than anybody in the world. Professional victim, right? Yeah, flying around in a jet that says Trump on it, gold all over the place. Yeah, get out of here with that professional victim stuff, right? He's a predator and he's a psychopath. That's my professional opinion. I'm not going to say amateur opinion. I'm good at this. I'm very good at it. I'm a lot better than a lot of those so-called experts that have gotten him wrong the entire time, right?
Wait. So you think he's a psychopath and not a sociopath? You actually think he's a psychopath?
He's as bad as it gets. He's doing the worst things that anybody could do. He's still standing beside the death jab. He is still standing beside the death jab after all these years. Fauci didn't fool him. Fauci is just another one of his little props. Where's my dope dolls here? And these dolls that we bought in the dope store. It says, "Take me home." It says, it has a price tag on it, right? I actually went into a dope store in Masako and I bought these dope dolls. He's a dope doll. You can listen when you're recruiting people. There's 4 main cheeses of recruitment, right? Mice, money, ideology, coercion, and ego. Mice. So when you're recruiting people, that's it. Money, ideology, coercion, and ego. That's the 4 main recruitment cheeses. You only need, his 2 cheeses are obvious. Me, money, and ego. Money and ego. He's a money and ego guy. You don't need Epstein Island for that guy. It's just a matter of his price and his ego. People that really go for the ego, you can pay them partly in their ego. Like people that are, if the one cheese they'll fall for is ego, you can actually pay them with their ego, right? And in his case, it's money and ego, right? So he's easy. Corrupt people demand corruption. They want corruption because corruption plays into the way that they roll. If you're one of the richest people in the world or come from an ecosystem that is, and you're running the ship, right? You want corruption because corruption has a price, right? Whether it's coercion or whatever, but usually, like with a guy like Trump, he's perfect. He's money and ego, and he's a child, right? And so he's easy to, and look at him. He mocks, like when you look at your movie, The Jones Plantation, you look at The Jones Plantation, he's mocking them. He's mocking them. He and the Zionists in general mock their victims, right? Why do they mock them? And I sent something to Bannon the other day. You see, what's her name? Erica, the whatever she is, so-called wife of Kirk, right? And she's mocking people. She's clearly now, when I say that, people are going to say, "Oh, you're so terrible," and blah, blah, blah. The Epsilons will say that. The Epsilons will absolutely say that. They'll go, "Oh, because they're at such a sub-level of this stuff. They think this is not a movie. They think it's all real. They think this is all actually legit. It's not legit. This is a major production. This is not, this is people that do things like 9/11 and October 7th and death jabs. This huge thing that's already killed probably tens of millions of people, at least 600,000 in Japan alone, dead, not injured. We don't even know what it's done to fertility rates, but dead, more than 600,000 in Japan, and they've got a much smaller population. Their population is like 1/3 of ours, right? And it's 600,000 in Japan, right? And in fact, Masako is running around here. One of her good friends is Dr. Yasufumi Murakami. He's the one that runs the studies in Japan on this stuff, right? We spend a lot of time with him, right? We're right in the middle of that stuff in Japan. We get to see it not from the newspapers, but from the people that are doing it. And what I'm getting to is, and they're still pushing the jab. They're still pushing it. Trump's still out there going, it's the best, it's safe and effective or whatever. Yeah, it's safe and effective. That's code talk for their guys. It's safe for us. We can kill all these idiots. And it's effective. It's killing all these idiots. And they, it's safe for us, though. It's not going to kill us. It's, it's just killing them. That's the safe part. We're not using nukes. We're not releasing water poisons into the water that may kill some of our people. One of the things that's very important, and no doubt some people watching this, I know some of the people that follow my work come from, very interesting backgrounds, right? And I've said to some of these people, some are actually billionaires and that sort of stuff. If you took the jab, if somebody told you to take the jab and you took it in the wild, if you're a king or a queen or a princess or whatever, and you took the jab and nobody told you not to, and you took it in the wild, like you had your doctor come over and give it to you, then there's no seat for you on their ark, right? That was an assassination attempt. They've already killed a lot of people, but they may have killed you too. You may get cancer and die this year, right? And from that jab, right? They may have already actually shot you with a lethal silver bullet, right? And you see these very wealthy people, very well-connected people dropping dead just like everybody else. They need to get it through their head. They think they're in this club because they fly around on the jets together. But if nobody told them not to take it, they were also part of the target set, right? They were on the targetable list. If nobody said, hey, Jimmy, this is for the masses, not for you. We need you to help run this thing when it's over. Well, if he took it and didn't get warned, look at Scott Adams, for instance, Mr. Arrogant. I can brainwash anybody, Scott Adams, right? Well, Scott Adams was trying to coerce people to take it, making people feel stupid that did not take it, and he took it. And he's a doper. He would openly smoke, talk about his smoking dope, and he would act like he's smoking dope, acting crazy, like he's completely high or whatever. And no executive function, talking like he's the smartest guy in the world. And now he's got cancer, and he may be, dead soon, right? So, I mean, but again, he's always trying to act like he was in the N Club. I got my blue check mark and all this stuff, right? He's always acting like he's in the N Club. And I messaged him. He blocked me eventually. I messaged him. I'm like, listen, if they didn't tell you not to take it, you're a punk to them. They are, and they may have already killed him because he's got cancer apparently now, according to him, unless he's changed his tune.
He came out and his whole thing was, hey, you won, you were right, but there was no way to tell. That was his whole thing. Like, I didn't actually miss this. It's just you got lucky and you were right. It's like, this shit was as plain as day. It was so obvious. I mean, I don't know. How much information do you need? And it's kind of a general thing. It's like it's a black pill, but it's like, I don't know at this point. I'm going to keep doing my thing. I got another film we want to make called Crazy Eddie, which is
Crazy Eddie.
Crazy Eddie, yes, in the works. It's going to be our generation's version of Dirty Harry, except for he's going to leave the police force. It's going to be a vigilante, but that's another story. But I don't know what's going to wake people up if they're not woken up by now. If they can't see, when you got Trump talking about how great the jab is, doing deals with Borla. I had a guy tweet me today, said that it's the system. He's moving the chess players around, but the system needs to remain the same. And I'm like, dude, the system works against you. I don't know what to tell you. I said, you keep believing in fantasies. I don't know what to tell you, but
if they think billionaire Trump is looking out for them. Seriously, I mean, at some point, we've got to move on. We've got to triage.
You can't.
Who can? Yeah, we got to.
That's right.
Just got to move on. Sorry.
That's right.
Bye.
That's right. I can't waste any more time with you. I tried in 2020. Yeah. I argued with people till my face turned blue. I finally had a really good friend of mine. He's a very intelligent guy, and I still love the guy. But I had to just say, I got to cut you off. And then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to do my work. Do what I can, and I'm not going to sit there. I'm not beating my head against the wall anymore. I don't have time. Life's too short, and it's never going to work. It's not going to work anyway. I mean, I could show the guy over and over again. It's not going to work, so what's the point, right?
Yeah, prioritize.
Right. Well, so on that note, I won't keep you too much longer, but America's, like we both agree, we think America's going to break up. What that looks like, I don't know, but I think reality is going to assert itself here very soon. I mean, this thing is so insane at this point. It's just so insane what they're doing. What are some 3 or 4 or 5 good piece of advice you could give people who are awake, who are thinking, who are very worried? A lot of people can't leave the country and travel around. They got kids here. They don't want to leave. Like, what can Americans do? What can Westerners do right now to protect themselves from what's coming?
First and foremost is don't support anybody who pushed that jabs. Don't send money or give any psychological or verbal support to people who are actually obviously not acting in our interest. I mean, seriously, and don't go on the epsilon and go, well, who did you want, Biden? Now, I get it. Trust me, I can do the math. But that doesn't mean that you then support the guy who's just killing you with a different weapon, right? Just because that guy is Biden is shit on the street doesn't mean that that other guy then is a hero. That doesn't, that equation doesn't work. And so first of all, we never support somebody who's actually killing us and against us, right? And remember, your fiat is sooner or later you're going to wake up and that fiat's not going to be there. It's very important to study brainwashing techniques. Very important. And like one great book on that is called Rape of the Mind by Joost Meerlo, 1956. I would read that one. Rape of the Mind by Joost Meerlo. Yeah. And he's a Dutch psychologist. That's a very good book. Now that's a book you need to turn off the music and read it quietly and study it, because you need to concentrate when you're reading it and let it sink in and then read the crowd, And so the thing is once you're cognizant of what is the techniques that they're using, now you've got a little bit of defense against it, right? And actually, if Sun Tzu were alive, Masako and I were joking the other day, if Sun Tzu were alive, he might say, the acme of brainwashing is to know that you're being brainwashed and brainwash your brainwasher, right? Reverse it on him. It's like, because remember, your brainwasher can be brainwashed too. So, just because they're coming, it's like, somebody's trying to put you in a headlock, but you reverse it and you choke them out. You know what I mean? Seriously, don't always play defense. Like when you sense that somebody's doing it, don't just like, oh no, I'm getting beat up. It's like, no, just who's doing this? I'm going to brainwash them back, right? So practice it yourself and don't do it maliciously, obviously, right? Because remember, what's brainwashing? It's basically influence, right? And influence can be used like Trump uses it in a malignant way, right? He's a good influencer. He knows all the arts and artifices of influence, right? And he exercises them to the nth degree, but he reverses the polarity on them, right? The thing is all these techniques and tactics that are used to dissolve our countries, you could take the same exact techniques and tactics, just reverse the polarity, and it would make us stronger. Like instead of having dope stores and saying, well, what did you want? Alcohol instead? How about neither one, right? If you just reverse the polarity, you can make our families stronger. You can make our men stronger. You can make, and women need to demand strong men. Women are an important base of all this, right? That's a problem women have right now across America and across Japan and across here in Thailand. I've heard so many women complain that they can't find manly men. They want manly men. They do organically, deep down inside, they want a man that can smash a bear in the face, right? Deep down inside, they want a man that can fight, right? They want a man that will fight for them. They want a man, who has testosterone. All this other brainwashing is nonsense, because deep inside, that's what they want, right? Let me jump on that. Is that I've never in my life, and this is for the young men out there, I've never in my life had a problem getting a woman who was worth anything because I was too manly. Not once did that ever happen. You'll have a problem beating them off of you if you're too manly. That's right. The thing. Women organically want a strong man, right? That's just part of their nature. And we want a woman part of our nature is we want a woman who can raise babies and be mama bear, right? And that's our nature, right? And so at the end of the day, the brainwashing that's taken place has been to split that and to atomize us, to make young people fight old people, to make white people and black people fight each other, different languages fight each other, right? To make, boys and girls fight each other and all this ridiculousness. Okay, we're back. Had another technical difficulty. Let me just kind of summate what we were talking about before we got so rudely interrupted. I asked you what people can do. You said basically don't trust somebody who is pushing that jabbo on you, which obviously that's what Trump is still doing, which means either he believes it works, which if he does, he's an idiot,
or he is scamming you and putting your children's lives and you in danger, which means he's terrible, or 3, he's just an egomaniac and can't admit he's wrong, which is none of those are good options. So yeah, don't trust somebody that's pushing that on you, and anybody, not just him. The second thing you said is fiat currency. Be careful, because obviously when the empire falls, the fiat's going to fall with it. The third thing you talked about was watch out for mind control and brainwashing and propaganda tactics. And I want to just wrap that, do a little maybe self-promotion, but there's you brought up that Juiced, what's Juiced's name? The author Juiced.
Juiced Mirlo, the author of Rape of the Mind. It's a 1956 book. It's really worth reading, Rape of the Mind.
Yeah, my second episode, I interviewed a guy named Jason Christoff, who's an expert in mind control and psychological warfare, and he recommended that same author. I would suggest also people go watch Barnum World, because
I'll watch it.
Yeah, it's a really good, propaganda 101. Actually, need a little more depth to it, and it ties into what we've actually gone through here in this country, and at least in the West, and particularly America. But I look at Jones Plantation and Barnum World as sort of a diptych. And by the way, Barnum World, because of the promise we made on the crowdfunding campaign, it's free on YouTube, which I don't recommend, but there it is. So you can just go watch it anytime. But the diptych is the Jones Plantation kind of teaches people about how the infrastructure was formed in the enslavement system that we live in now. And Barnum World shows them the tips and the tricks and the tools that they use to keep that infrastructure going. And we have a guy comes in named Natty Jones. It's a mockumentary, but he plays a Hollywood producer / propagandist. And he just does a reveal and tells us the tips and tricks. And his whole thing is like, it's almost like Revelation of the Method. And he's like, I'm going to tell you about it. It's not going to matter to anybody. Nobody's going to do anything with the information anyway. He has like pretty cynical view of the human race, basically. And so I would suggest people take a look at that, Barnum World. But is there anything else you want to add to that list?
Well, obviously, like, for instance, Trump and whoever replaces him is not acting in our best interest. So that's a done deal. And pretty much anything that he pushes is suspect. For instance, Bitcoin, I think, is absolutely insane to invest in Bitcoin. But I know wealthy people, very wealthy people that are deep in it, and I think they're absolutely screwing up.
I'm one of them. I'm not wealthy, but I have Bitcoin, yeah.
I first got some in 2013. I have a little tiny bit now. Mm-hmm. So I'm cognizant of how it works and all that. I just used some last week, right? It is useful for some things, but I would not keep any substantial part of your wealth in that. I think it's going to blow up. I think it's quite obvious. And but let's see. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm wrong about the jabs, because I think it's in the same category. I think it's going to. So if you've got a substantial part of your wealth in it, I think you're going to lose it. Ultimately, I don't know when it'll be. Obviously, it's gone up a huge amount since it was first out there. But let's see. That I've said my piece on that. But when it comes to, we're in a state of war, and people need to behave like we're in a state of war. And when anybody that's intentionally trying to make confusion, bring confusion into a situation, that's an enemy, right? So we need to be quick. People need to really practice their ability to quickly assess a situation and derive correct answers, because your life depends on being correct, right? And that means you need to be brutal with your own decision-making cycle, and practice predicting things about people and situations. And over time, and be very brutal with the things you do right and the things that you do wrong. And over time, you're going to get better. You'll get, no matter how good you are now, you'll get better. You'll get better if you practice actually prediction. But you don't have to do it publicly. Just do it privately. But write stuff down. Keep yourself honest, right? Like, so that you don't forget things about, and over time, I've become very good at predicting. Now, let me be clear about that. I can't predict things like, if you ask me, what will the stock market do next week? I don't know. You know what I mean? I have no idea. And flip a coin. But so the predictions that I can do quite well are, after many years of practicing, are the ones that just kind of naturally well up in me, right? In other words, I look at the situation with Trump and that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, that guy's a traitor, right? And but that welled up in me. Nobody forced me to make that prediction. Nobody puts me on the spot and says, well, what do you think of this? I'm like, I don't know. So it's the predictions that that kind of naturally well up. And like, for instance, that the screwworms would make it to the back to and be a problem. That was just welled up. I'm like, I got cognizant of the screwworms and the situation. I'm like, those things will make it back to America. That's my prediction. Strong prediction. Nord Stream, same thing. Groningen, same thing. A lot of these things. Darien Gap, main invasion route, same thing, right? That Trump would end up getting in a second term and be worse than anybody ever imagined. I said it publicly so many times, even I can't remember, right? So those were natural predictions that welled up in me. And the main thing that you have to also be cognizant of is making sure that you not care what others think. Right? You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you need to be public about all your predictions, because that could get you killed, right? And but and that could get you thrown out of something. But you need to be honest with yourself, right? You need to be, so that you orient yourself in a proper direction to take what's coming, right? So even if you don't have to be public about it, you don't have to persuade anybody about it. Just try to orient yourself correctly as much as possible, and you're going to get good at it over time. Even if you're terrible at it today, you're going to quickly see you're getting better and better, and it's going to make a bigger and bigger difference as the energy in the system increases and as things get more and more intense. Your ability to gauge and measure people quickly is going to never be more important in the future. We're going to reach a point where your ability to judge people quickly is definitely a life and death skill. It always is, actually, but it's going to become more so than it ever has been, unless you've been a prisoner in something on death row. You know what I mean? So but so here we go. We're going into what's obviously going to be an increased state. I think eventually we're going to have food problems. I've been saying that now for 5 years. I think the beast, let's call it, is setting conditions, and this is all about setting conditions. War. The people that do war very well are very good at setting conditions for success, or setting conditions for failure of their enemy as well. And so sometimes that takes many years. It's clear that conditions are being set to put us into famines. It hasn't happened yet. I think that the beast has found that we've turned out to be more resilient on food than was expected, but it's very clear that our resilience is decreasing, right? As on whole, on a global scale and on a national scale. And I can give you so many small instances that are part of the larger matrix of situation. For instance, water from the Rio Grande River, between Mexico and the United States. A lot of that water is being diverted to Mexico against our treaty, and it's being used to grow crops in Mexico. So a lot of our farmers are going out of business. The same is happening, there and other parts of the United States for different reasons. Same is happening in Netherlands and England and so many places. Japan. I mean, you go up to the farms in Japan, like Masako and I go up there. There's like bears running around. I'm like literally. I mean, bears coming into the towns now because so many farms are empty. There's like monkeys and deers and hogs out there. And these bears are dangerous, man. They're killing people in Japan. So, I mean, what I'm getting to is there's fewer and fewer farms and farmers in Japan. So the farms are becoming like, safari land. And we went to a bear hunter and spent a half a day with him, actually. He had a whole big old stack of bear skulls and 4 freezers of bear meat and deer meat and hog meat, that sort of stuff. What I'm getting to is we're clearly getting, and that includes here in Thailand, actually. The food resilience in Thailand is still good. It's still much better than most parts of the world, but it's clearly even here slowly being eroded. Prices are slowly going up, that sort of thing. But in some other countries, prices have gone up dramatically. So your ability to produce food is quite, important. And also your ability to defend yourself, because you are going to be 911. So your ability to communicate is very important. Your ability to communicate and so that everybody understands how to communicate, however you decide to do it, radios or whatever. You know, in a lot of the places that I go to around the world, I'm out, you know, with so many different cultures. There's a lot of like villages that I go to in like, you know, different countries. They still use like bells to alert the village of things. Like down the Darien Gap, there's villages, they still clang metal when they call meetings and things like that. Different number of clangs would be an emergency. You know what I'm saying? There's all kinds of ways to communicate. So many. So you need to think about that and take inventory of the skills of the people, the strengths and weaknesses of the people around you. Everybody listening to this has a lot of skills, and a lot of those skills you don't maybe normally think about because you're not really tapping into them. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, he's a retired Green Beret. At his church, he said, you know, he basically made a spreadsheet of the skills of the people at his church, and there was one older lady, grandmother. And I think she was a great-grandmother, as I recall. And she was sad. She's like, I don't have any skills. And he's like, you raised all these children and grandchildren successfully. You obviously have skills. I mean, if you can raise children and grandchildren successfully, he said she had like a nice family. He's like, you have a lot of skills. Let's talk about what you just normally do, right? So she knows how to can food, right? And so, you know, and she's like, she didn't even count that as a skill because it's just so normal. It'd be like counting, for her, it'd be like counting, tying your shoes as a skill set. But for most people, the ability to can food is a significant skill set that needs to be passed on. And that's what he said. He said, you know, that's really important. And so please make a list of what you need. You know, salt or jars or pressure cookers or whatever, vinegar, all the things that you need, right? Tell me what you need. And just make a list. I'll make it happen. You'll get the stuff. And then I'll bring over the young people and please teach them how to can. And your job is not to be the canner for them. Your job is to teach them how to can and then supervise it so that, you know, pass the skills on. And so that's what he did. You know, just stuff like that. Like this grandmother's all sad, thinks she has no skills. And she's got one of the primary skills that are needed. You know, the ability. And remember, anybody that's run a successful family with grandchildren and stuff, you know, they're actually natural psychologists too. So it's like a built-in psychologist, you know. But anyway, you know, I think when he told me that story, he was quite satisfied because he said, you know, she feels good now. She's got a reason to, you know, not just to exist, but she knows her skill is important and everybody needs it.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned earlier, first of all, calling it the beast. We should have been doing. That's a great one. We got to use that all the time now. What's the beast going to do? But you mentioned, you know, prediction. I think you're really talking about is pattern, because, you know, I'm not going to predict what the stock market's going to do. You're talking about pattern recognition and archetype recognition, which comes from life experience and also what you've done, which is an immense amount of studying, right?
It does. And a lot of study and being with a lot of different types of people. Good people, bad people, many different cultures, so many. And, you know, I've spent most of my life outside of the United States in 99 countries, actually. So most of my life has been downrange in wars, quite a few years, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, out with the Maoists in Nepal, fighting, a lot of fighting here in Thailand, believe it or not, very lethal, actually. And so I've seen a lot of different things and situations. So it's helped me, you know, to develop a skill set that's quite useful. Like, for instance, to see through Trump, it was like looking at him through an X-ray machine.
Yeah.
I can see any pins in his bones. I can see them. He doesn't have any because he never broke a bone, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, the beast for people, I mean, just for regular people not to get, or people that haven't thought about this much, I mean, the beast is not that hard to pattern recognize. I mean, once you can kind of see it, it's pretty obvious what it's doing. You know, I mean, the COVID thing, once you could see through that, it was like, I know exactly where this is going, you know? But don't
make excuses for him either. Don't make excuses for him. Never make excuses for, like, Fauci fooled him. If you're making it, you're setting yourself up to die if you're giving passes on all these different things, that low of a level of, he has to be a good guy. No, he doesn't. You got to get and really like an acid test. You know, with your equal sign, all these factors equal what? You know, a lot of people start with what's on the right side of the equal sign, the answer that they want, and then they design this math problem that equals the answer they want.
Right.
But I spend my time on this side of the equation trying to figure out what it equals, right? As opposed to what, the answer has to be. You have to start with the left side of the equation and work your way to the right side of the equation. And the right side of the equation, when I looked at all those factors with Trump, I'm like, enemy. That guy's an enemy for sure. He's going to commit treason. He's a coward. He's got a very terrible, whole personality structure is actually quite. It made me. I wanted to mention it to you earlier. It's made me wonder many times if it was just that he was a product of this brainwashing since he was a child, right? In other words, he could have been raised up into this sense because this brainwashing has been going on since long before our great-grandparents were born, right? So by the time you and I were born, we were born into a highly sophisticated, very mature brainwashing system.
Right.
It's not like it's recently matured.
Right.
It was mature before our parents met. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so our parents and grandparents were actually born into this system, actually. They were actually already born. So in other words, the people all around us in this jungle, they were actually part of it, whether they knew it or not. Some people, like G. Edward Griffin, he's amazing man. I don't know if anybody's read A Creature from Jekyll Island, but that's an amazing book. He messages me sometimes. That guy, back, in his old films that were in black and white, he's still kicking strong. He's still fighting, man. I want to be like him. You know what I mean? Like fighting to the end,
Yeah.
And he'll message me sometimes. He's on it. And look at what he was saying back when it was black and white. It was like in the 50s or something, and he's still fighting. But his stuff I said to him one time a couple months ago, I was like, you know what? I looked at your old stuff again, and if I want to know what's happening, I just look at your old videos and add drones. It's like basically, you know what I mean? All the stuff that's happening, like, and then they'll do all these different things, and then people will beg to put the army on the streets. Mm-hmm. And he was saying stuff like that, and now that's what's happening. I see MAGA people now going, great, Trump's putting troops on the streets. I'm like, that's the guy who just pushed the jab, right? I mean, seriously. He's not putting troops on the streets to deport people. We don't need that. We just need to deport them. We should have been deporting them. We should be deporting 1 million a month. You know what I mean? But we're not. It's just not happening. He's handing out visas, right? He's allowing more people. I mentioned to you earlier. I met with a guy he's Thai, but he became a U.S. citizen. So he's a Thai. I had dinner with him a few weeks ago, and he just left Houston. He's a Thai American, and he came back to Thailand because an Indian took his job. He said everybody in Texas is losing their software jobs. He's a software programmer. Mm-hmm. So he came back to Thailand looking for a software job because he said, Indians are, and Trump's the one bringing them in, right? Mm-hmm. So there you go. I mean, so they're literally destroying our resilience by taking our jobs away.
It's the thing with when you're analyzing these so-called leaders like Trump, stop adding zeros to the problem. So like when we talk about film, when we talk about low budget and there's an issue, hey, my buddy Legal Man's always like, add 3 zeros to it. And is it an issue now? Because somebody wanted to, take the song and do something, or, somebody wanted to do something with it that had to do with the IP, and he's like, add 2 zeros, add 3 zeros to the budget. Now is it a problem? Oh yeah, now it's a real problem. But with these leaders, just pull the zeros off the problem and just put them into your life. And imagine them. They're not different. They shouldn't be. They're not living by different. They're living by different rules in some sense.
Actually, that's perfect. I love that. So if you let me repeat that to make sure I'm understanding, because I think I understand. So in other words, okay, the guy's a billionaire. He's acting like an idiot, but since he's a billionaire, people give him a pass. Is that what you're saying?
Well, he's also they have this delusion about authority and arbitrary authority, and they delude themselves on what their lives are like and what they're supposed to do, and they live by different rules as other human beings. They have this delusion, and so take all that off and just put him in your life, put him in your living room, put him in your he runs a pizza shop or whatever it is, and he acts the way he does. Are you going to still make excuses for him? I don't think so.
There you go. I'm going to start using that. I'm
Go
going to
ahead.
start saying that. Just
Yeah.
take some zero. That's perfect, man. All the best things I say, I steal from somebody else.
Yeah.
You know,
Inspired by.
One time I was doing it. That's right. Inspired.
That's right.
Time I was doing an interview like 4 or 5 years ago. I've told this story quite a few times. And because I've read so many books on pandemic and famine, right? A lot, like many, many dozens, right? And I mean, like probably 7 dozen. It took many years, right?
God.
It's a lot. It took, by the time this pandemic broke out, I had already read so many. Anyway, it's very helpful because when you're studying war, you need to study pandemic and famine because those go with war. So anyway, what I was, because it's a triangle, right? And so pandemic, famine, and war go together. It's like a triangle. You'll always get if you get a big war or a big pandemic or a big famine, you'll get the other two, right? And so a big one, not some little pandemic or something. But anyway, what I was getting to is I said that on an interview. I said these things always go together. I even made a name for it, PAMFA, pandemic, famine, war, right? And this one of my readers called in. She goes, you always talk about that like you invented it or made it up. And I said, I did, proudly. And she said, no, it's in the Bible. The 4 horsemen. I'm like, yikes. You're right. Well, if you're going to plagiarize, go big.
Yeah, plagiarize if you're going to steal from the best, man.
Steal from the Bible. Yeah. I mean, and I didn't realize, actually, that's probably where I originally got it from, but didn't remember that's where I got it from. Because I can see the patterns, though. Because when you read enough and you study war enough, the patterns are quite clear. Like, it is in the Bible. And then in my own studies of war, which have been decades long, you can see it's a clear pattern. Pandemic, famine, and war definitely go together. And it is in the Bible, which is I think the Bible is actually something like a survival manual, actually. That's what I look at it, as a survival manual, because one of the proof in the pudding there is that the people that read it tend to survive more than those who don't. That's probably why it's still so many copies of it out there, because you're probably more likely to survive if you read it than if you don't. Because there's a lot of like common sense skills in there, like the 10 Commandments. Don't do these things that'll actually get you killed. So you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Steal from your neighbor. Go for your neighbor's wife. Okay, you're not going to survive. You keep that up, right?
I got 2 more questions for you, and I'm going to switch it up real quick. I just want to hear the story. So you took a photo. You're a war photographer. You took a photo that was Time's photo of the year, right? If I understand that. And then that degenerate, spineless slob, insult to filmmaking, Michael Morse, put it in his film without giving you credit, and you sued him. Can you talk about this?
I forgot about that. Did he put it in a film? I think he did, didn't he?
I thought he put it in.
There were so many people that did that.
What was the one he did?
Sue him.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There were a lot of people that stole that photo. It's
okay.
It was a
fair use, baby.
Suicide car bomb. Yeah, that's what they kept saying, fair use. And I made a lot of money off people thinking they could do that, actually.
Okay.
Because, I fought many legal battles, but I never had to sue anybody. For instance, I bankrupted one magazine that stole it, called Shock Magazine. And they were a magazine that was their inaugural issue, and they said they put $25 million into the inaugural issue. That was a magazine from Hachette Filipacci Media, which is the biggest magazine conglomerate in the world. They got 250 titles like Elle and boating and flying and all that stuff. So anyway, they put the same photo on their cover, and they said, that I was their cover photographer. And people were messaging me. They were like, "Why did you give that photo to the anti-American French magazine?" I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." Then I saw it and I was like, wow. And they made it look like I was their cover photographer. Then they used some more of my photos in their spread. And anyway, long story short, they actually threatened me to sue me for defamation. And if I said again that, because I said publicly they stole my work, right? And they threatened to sue me for defamation. Anyway, I went total jihad on them, and I bankrupted the magazine. So you can find that online. You can web search my name, Shock Magazine Bankrupt. And the mechanisms of how I did that were, it was fun fighting. And so, I think that they didn't think I could beat them because they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And I didn't bankrupt the whole company, but I took that magazine out. And I took it out. It was a nice little war. It was a short war. It lasted maybe, 8 months. And they were out. And so and they had put a lot of money into launching that magazine. But there were a lot of people that stole my work, and I won every case, or actually everybody settled, including the U.S. Army, ABC, long list.
Wow.
Most of the people that used it, like, churches would use it and stuff, and people would say, "You're going to sue them?" I'm like, no, it's a church, man. Let them use it, because they're using it for there was this Islamic organization using it for peaceful purposes. They're like, "You're going to go after the Muslims?" I'm like, no, they're using it for peaceful purposes. They're not even making money off of it. I'm not going after anybody that's using it for peaceful purposes and not making a profit off of it or anything like that. I'm not, no, just have it. Please use it, And, but for the ones like Shock Magazine that are misusing it and anti-American or just profiting off of it, they're used to pushing photographers around, but I enjoy a good fight, and so like my lawyer, most people, they hire lawyers and they're like, "Oh, I got this great lawyer and I'm paying him all this money," and I'm like, "Listen, you're the lawyer, I'm the fighter, okay? You work for me, you take my lead, right? And I'm going in, right?" So my lawyer, I don't wait for him to do all the stuff, and all the paperwork and all that jazz. The way I went after Shock Magazine is I launched a campaign to get it. I mean, first of all, I told him to write registered letters to all their in-house attorneys of all the people carrying that magazine. Walden Books, Books A Million, all those guys, Barnes & Noble. I was like, please tell them that, that this company has willfully infringed upon my work. And therefore you are innocently infringing right now by carrying it. And we knew about 11,000 or so of their distributors and retailers and wholesalers. We had the list. That was how many outlets there were. There were fewer actually, offices. There were, like Walden Books or whatever would be one, but they have many stores, right? So we just, I said, listen, just do what I tell you to do. Write a letter, say these things, and do your lawyer magic. But send it, fax it, FedEx it, and call them and tell every one of them, if you take the magazine off your shelves, we won't name you in a lawsuit, right? Otherwise, because now that you've been notified, you're innocent you're just innocently infringing right now. That's stolen material, right? But if you leave it on the shelves, that's going to be willful infringement at a minimum, or even felonious infringement, right? You got 3 levels of infringement, right? Mm-hmm. And so they all took it out, and you could see Shock Magazine was shocked, because that was just part of the war. So then I had people going against their other magazines and whatnot, and we made a juicy settlement, right? And so this was a huge conglomerate that thought, all these photographers out there, they're used to getting pushed around. They don't know how to fight. They're afraid of these big people. Like the HFM, Chet Philipacci, they're like, "We'll never carry your work again." I'm like, I don't care. I don't even like you. So you're the biggest magazine conglomerate in the world. I don't care. I live in combat. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. When I get off this phone call, I'm going into a firefight. Fuck you. Sorry for my language, but that's how, that's serious, right? That's the world I was living in, was actual real combat, right? Years of it. Mm-hmm. So when it came down to like, you're going to intimidate me by not carrying my work, I don't care, right? And so I'm not just saying that. That's straight up, I'm coming to bankrupt your magazine, right? And I did, right? And so then, as I continued to fight, then they became interested in a settlement, and we did it, right? And I did that with a lot of different people. When we would fight, then we got to the point, once we had the credibility was there, my attorney would just call him up and say, "Well, you've infringed upon my client's work, and why don't you do a web search of my client's name and copyright infringement, and then call me on Monday with it, and we'll talk about a settlement," right? Yeah. Because they know they're going to get a fight, and they know it's going to be a good fight. It's not going to be, we're going to trade paperwork back and forth and all this stuff. No, it's going to be like straight up, you're going to lose some money on this, right? So you can either settle it right now and be done with it, or it's going to get juicy, right? But you have to get that credibility first. And when I went after the U.S. Army and won, and when I went after ABC and CBS and I don't know who, it was a long list, man. Every single one of them, check, 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 check. The first few, until I learned how to fight the fights really well, that was a little bit more difficult. But then after I learned how to fight it, then it got to be like, man, I hope somebody will infringe again this week. You know what I mean?
So you don't remember Michael Moore? You don't remember Mike fighting Michael Moore? Or you don't
I do remember Michael Moore now. But you got to remember there were so many fights.
Yeah.
And Michael Moore might be big on somebody's scale, but me, I'm dealing with like the U.S. Army and
fair
stuff
enough.
like that.
Fair
you know
enough,
what I mean?
fair enough,
I
yeah.
mean, Michael Moore is like, okay, that dude.
Yeah.
Right? But I do remember something with him. What did he do?
He did a movie. It was called it was the one he did on the war. I don't remember which one it was.
I do remember he did something. That you remanded me of it.
It's not a movie.
I'm sorry for that language, but that really is how I would talk with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't care.
They're used to pushing people around, and that's the thing. That's what I find. That's why I try to tell people, like all these big people that are pushing you around, they depend on their ability to just like chump you down, right?
Right.
And that was one of the things I found in fighting. One of the things I found in fighting the big people, like Hachette Philippachi or the Army, is when you come in, you're this little pipsqueak, and they're like, well, Hachette Philippachi, their responses were completely arrogant, right? And I'm like, oh, we're going to beat these dudes so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and my lawyer, I was on this interview, I think it was, I don't know, it was some Hugh Hewitt show or something like that. And I said, Hachette Philippachi, stole my work. And, I was just like, and their in-house attorney, that was a live interview. Their in-house attorney, her name was Catherine Flickinger. She called my attorney immediately. Like, it was like minutes, man. I hung up. The interview was over. I was back from Iraq or something for a short time. And he calls me up. My attorney calls me up. He's like, whoa, Catherine Flickinger just called me up because by this point I knew her name because we were, in a proper fight with him. And he said, and she said, if you say again that they stole your work, they may sue you for defamation. I said, really? A French company just said that, huh? And he's like, I know what you're thinking. I know. Don't do it. That's like I said, this is perfect. This is a myth. This is David against the giant, right? So I went right back on, and I said, you're not going to believe this. You could probably find this interview online somewhere, right? You could probably find these. It's probably in Wayback Machine or something. I said something like, Hachette, their in-house attorney, just called up and threatened to sue me for defamation for saying that they stole my work. So they just this is a multi-billion-dollar company. They can crush me like a gnat. They just threatened to sue me for defamation. My attorney warned me not to say that they stole my work after they stole my work. They stole my work, and now they're threatening to sue me for defamation for stealing my work. Are you watching this, Catherine? Right? And so I was like, let's get it on, boy. If you win, what are you going to get? If I win, it's a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, when Rocky's fighting Apollo Creed, and at some point Apollo Creed's like, this chump thinks it's a real fight, right? Here's the thing. When you're fighting big people, and this is very important, remember what I'm saying. When you're fighting big people and you're the pipsqueak, in every case I've ever been in, they make massive errors in the first opening moves. Massive. If you were playing chess, they're like, if it's a chessboard, they're like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to play chess, and they just move a piece out there. And you're like, and then you move a piece, and then they just move a piece because they're paying attention to something else. I don't know, going to coffee with all the other bigwigs, and you move another piece, and then the next thing you move another. They just randomly, they don't even consider what you just did. They just think they're going to beat you. And before you know, like, I'll take that queen. They're like, oh, that's when they realize it's serious, right? Like, for instance, their North American president, his name was Jack Klieger of their North American operations. He did this conference up in New York, right? I remember this now. So he gets on this conference and he's telling these people. So he's the president of North American operations for Hachette Philippachi Media, right? He's the one that was in charge of launching that Shock magazine. So he's the dude that did it. So he gets up in front of all these magazine CEOs and all these buying agents and all this stuff, and he actually says, Michael Yon is just doing this for publicity. Please continue to carry this magazine, basically, is what he said. Just continue to keep it on your shelves. And I'm like, whoa, that was perfect. First of all, that was defamation, saying I'm just doing it for that. I'm like, so, okay, that's nice. We'll add that to the fight. And secondly, he just encouraged them to do felony copyright infringement, because there's 3 levels of copyright infringement. There's innocent. There's what's the middle one? I said I'm getting tired. It's like 2 a.m.
Oh, sorry. It was innocent, then it was willful, and then felonious.
That's right. And willful, and then felonious, right? So innocent is like I sell you something and you don't realize that it was stolen, right? So it's like some apples or something. I sell you some apples, and then you sell the apples, and you didn't know they were stolen, so you're not a criminal, but you would still have to pay the owner of the apples the profit that you made.
Right.
So not a big deal. It's not a felony or anything, but you need to pay him that money, and those are his apples. It was your fault for not, checking who you bought it from, but not a big deal. Slap on the wrist. All right. And I mean, you don't need to go to jail for that. But then there's willful. Willful is like you knew you shouldn't have been selling that stuff, but you did it anyway. Mm-hmm. But felonious is like you straight up stole it. Like you work for the software company that makes the video game, and you had an advanced copy of it, and you sold it. You're going to prison, right? You know what I mean? I mean, that's willful. That's felonious. So that's felony copyright infringement, right? So when Jack Klieger got up and he told all those people continued to sell that when he knew he had no right to it, that was the actual. That was conspiracy to commit. That's a felony, right? And he's admitting it to my attorney and me. Somehow he and I both noticed it at the same time because we were tracking that guy. So he noticed it and I noticed it. We're like calling him. And he goes, "Did you see what Jack Klieger said?" And I think I was calling him first or whatever. And I'm like, "Yeah, man, this is great. Now we can get the FBI involved, right?" I mean, anyway, what I'm getting to is rewinding. They were making those very simple errors that were big. I mean, when he got in front of all those CEOs and buyers and all that stuff and said that I'm just doing it for publicity, which was defamation, by the way, which would be a whole different line. And thank you for that, giving me a queen to play with. And you know what I mean? And then he's telling everybody to keep doing it. I'm like, dude, I just took the queen off the board, and you just gave me another queen, right? Defamation. And seriously, if anybody continues to carry those things, we're gonna go after all of them for felony defamation, for felony copyright infringement, right? Every single one of them took them off their shelves. Rite Aid, the whole works, like 11,000. Catherine Flickinger called up my attorney, and she's like, he said something like, she was screaming, actually, "Your client is costing my client millions of dollars." That's how stupid they are. She actually gave him feedback. Just imagine, your artillery is landing in the middle of our base. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, seriously, that's how stupid they are. I mean, what I'm getting to is when you're fighting these big people, until they realize once they realize they're in a big fight, now they might beat you down, right? You know what I'm saying? So if you play your game very smart in the beginning, you'll see that they'll make strategic errors, which you can exploit later. And that happened in every single case, whether it was with the Army or whoever.
Right. They're big and sloppy in the beginning because they don't think anything of you. They have no respect for you yet. You can get some moves in.
Big and sloppy, and by the time they respect you, you already took their queen off the board or whatever. Now you've got the initiative. Now you've got some initiative.
Well, that's why I gave away Barnum World, because I don't recommend doing that kind of project, but it was more of a public service because I knew I was going to use B-roll. And so I didn't want to sell it with other people's work in it. You know what I mean? So we just put it up for free because I knew I was going to use it, and I needed fair use is when you're not selling it. You know what I mean? I mean, there are cases where documentaries will use people's content, and there's a certain way you can do it. You can still sell the documentary. I didn't want to get into all that.
So many people stole my work and said it's fair use, and I'm like, okay, you're going to have fun with that. You're going to pay. Right?
Yeah.
You know, you can scream all the fair use.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
You're going to before this is over, you're going to write a check. So you might as well just get to that point really quickly. And you know what I mean?
It's tough to call fair use if you're making a bunch of money on it. It's not really fair use. It's not fair to the guy who made the stuff that's not making the money off you're making off of his content. Yeah. And the problem is the reverse of that is Jones Plantation, where that's not fair use. We created a fiction film out of whole cloth, which is at least 100 times harder than a documentary, maybe more. And that's for sale. And so you don't have the right to take my work that I worked, 3 years on, blood, sweat, and tears, and go and throw it up on your freaking BitChute channel. Sorry, I'm selling that. I'll decide what it's worth. Which burns me
now,
up.
You can use parts of it as, for
clip it,
public discussion, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can clip it, but don't be an idiot and give away the film. I mean, I had
take the whole movie.
No, hell no.
Take the whole movie.
No, that's a whole different situation. I don't want to get into the whole documentary versus fiction thing, but creating a reality out of thin air fiction is extremely difficult.
Here's the thing: a lot of people don't. Intellectual property is one of the most misunderstood, areas of law. You can ask your IP attorneys. I've done so much IP stuff. At the end of the day, everything that you like. When I just wrote these notes, I don't need to register that with the copyright. This is copyrighted. Literally, when I just wrote these notes, that's literally copyrighted. That's my copyrighted material. The notes that you wrote while we're talking is your copyrighted material. That's important to keep that in mind, right? And so, you don't have to register it. Now, you'll get more protections if you register your photos or whatever, but you don't have to. The moment you click that shutter on your camera, that's copyrighted in the United States, right? And so you don't have to. It's helpful to register it. Again, it can help you with later if you get into into any litigation or whatever. But it's not necessarily. It's still copyrighted, and you got to keep that in mind. So when people just throw these things out like fair use, they don't know what they're talking about. You know how many people threw the fair use grenade out, and I ended up just taking their money. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, Mr.
You picked it up, threw it back at them.
Yeah, they're always like trying to lecture you on the law. I'm just like, be quiet. You're going to end up writing a check, so you might as well just get on. Okay, bye. Next. Take care of him, lawyer, right? So on the little stuff, I just let the lawyer go do it. But on the big ones, I would lead those fights. Like HFM, I led that one, right? That was like, I'm taking charge because this is not going to be just a paperwork fight. It's going to be a PR fight and that sort of thing. But again, they weren't difficult to beat because they made so many massive errors in those opening moves that were easy to exploit for the rest of the fight.
But how dare they take your shit and put it in their magazine and try to sell it? Your ass is on the ground risking your life. You're literally in a war zone. You catch this beautiful picture that you were there. You did it. It's a gorgeous picture. And where do these people get off? They should have called you beforehand and say, how much do you want for this? They probably would have paid you a lot less. They called you and said, man, you're an amazing photographer. This is an amazing photo. We're starting this magazine. We're a startup. How much could we pay you to use this in our magazine and give you the front page and all the credit in the world? You would have been way more amenable to deal with, I imagine, than just throwing it up there.
It would have been a lot less.
Yeah,
that's right. It would have been a lot less.
That's right.
Actually, a lot of times I didn't let people use that photo in many cases, depending on how they were going to use it.
Right.
And in that case, I probably would not have actually let them use it.
Okay.
When I saw the nature of that magazine.
Fair enough.
But still, that was my prerogative. It was my
point still stands though. Point
property.
still stands. I mean, at least they had some
the
integrity
point
in
still
this.
stands. Yeah, the point still stands. And also, it bankrupted their magazine.
Yeah.
Because once we got it taken off of all those shelves, right? Once we got it, see, they were in a perfect position to do this. First of all, psychologically, I was in a great position that I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of them.
Right.
And I wanted to fight them, right? I was like, let's go. You know what I mean? And I was like, ding, ding, let's go, and fight's on, and the next thing was, the important thing was I was not afraid of them. That's very important. And the next thing was they just made so many errors. The fight wasn't that difficult. But so one of the things was they were so exposed. I'm like, so I understood quite a bit about copyright fighting because I'd been in so many. So I know a little bit about copyright law because I fought so many fights, right? I would fight them side by side with my lawyer in the beginning. So I got a lot of schooling on it. And so and so I realized, well, they're very exposed. HFM's very exposed because all of these magazines and all these people, they're not used to somebody going after all the distributors because they're all doing innocent infringement, right? So what they all tried to say was, no, you need to take it up with HFM. We're like, well, we'll be taking it up with you, actually, because you're the one that's been notified now. As soon as we notified you and you still sell it at a bare minimum, you're doing willful infringement. At a bare minimum. It's actually almost certainly felonious infringement at that point, right? Once we've notified you that it's illegal for you to sell that, then and you're still selling it for a profit, we could probably put whoever's doing it in jail, right? I mean, we could actually take it down to the local magazine shop level, you know, the shop that's on, you know, 2nd and Folsom Street. You know what I mean? We can take it down to that, right? I mean, if you really wanted to get nitty gritty and atomic about it, but what we did was we took it to the distributor and wholesaler and retailer level and went after every single one of them, and they all just like, you know, because you think about it from their perspective. Let's say you're a big retailer and you've got a couple thousand outlets or stores. So this magazine is going to be like 0.0001 of your profit, right?
There's no risk reward. Why even take the risk? There's no reward.
You're going to be like, what? Is this a real fight? You're going to like, yeah, well, I think it is. Okay, take it off, right? And that was our intent. We wanted them to just stop carrying it, right? And that gave us credibility with HFM. It gave us a lot of credibility because we were also getting other people were canceling their subscriptions to Elle and, you know, Boating and all these different magazines because they also carried 250 other titles, and I was getting a lot of interviews talking about this. And I'm like, oh yeah, and here's their other titles, which I put all their titles on my website. And there were a lot of people. I had millions of readers back then, right? So millions of readers were like, you know, looking at this, and many of them were actually canceling their magazine subscriptions, right? And that's why Catherine Flickinger called her, you know, my attorney and said, you know, your client's costing my client millions of dollars because people are canceling some. So in addition to going after Shock Magazine, we shotgunned it against all of their whole thing, right? And so again, their attack surface was huge, and what was our attack surface? Tiny, right? If you beat me to the ground and I got no money left, what's it going to do to your multi-billion-dollar bottom line? But if I beat you, I'll be talking about it 15 years later, which we're doing right now, and bragging about it, right? And so, you know, it was good bragging rights. I haven't bragged about that in years. I need to brag about it more because, you know, that was a great fight, you know, and like Stanley McChrystal, when I had that big fight with him, you know, it's you know, eventually these fights are very expensive at times in time and that sort of thing. And so when it's done, and that's one of the things that the people that if they put you in a position where you have to fight, you need to make it clear to them that if I win, I will be bragging about this for years. And if you win, you're going to have bragging rights. But I would say, you know, I'm not supposed to brag. I'm from the South. It goes against my culture and everything and all that. But I'm going to break my culture, and I'm going to brag about it for the rest of my life that I beat HFM, right? That I beat the biggest magazine conglomerate in the world, and I'm just a little photographer from Florida, right? And it worked.
Well, on that line, this will be the last thing I want to ask you before we get out of here. And I know it's late there. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This has been a lot of fun, man. It's been amazing. What if somebody had to ask you a couple sentences, if you can, how would you describe yourself? What are you? Are you a photographer? You're like what? Just for people that maybe have never familiar with your work, and they want to figure out what are you. I probably should ask you this in the very beginning, but I still want to know.
I don't know. I mean, Masako asked me that, you know, all the time. My wife, you know,
yeah,
because I'm just somebody. I'm a perpetual student. You know, and a perpetual student and a defender of my people at the end of the day, right? I mean, otherwise I would just be doing this for money, which, you know, I would be not doing interviews and that sort of thing. I would be doing, I don't know, maybe private intelligence and analysis and that sort of thing because, you know, the value of my analysis is actually quite high, actually. And so but I can see that if Americans don't stand up, if Japanese don't stand up, if Dutch don't stand up, our countries will fall. And we have great countries. Our ancestors made great countries. All of us watching this, everybody watching this, all of our families have been through pandemics and famines and wars. Everybody watching this, your family line came through hell to get here. And we somehow, our ancestors put us in a position where we can actually talk about this and be in safety at the moment. But we got to this point through grueling efforts. and we need to be cognizant that our turn is up to bat, right? And the only reason that these beasts are winning, because ultimately they're actually quite weak. As long if a sufficient number of people just say, I don't comply, like the Border Patrol people I saw up and down the U.S. border from SpaceX all the way to San Diego, if they just said, I'm not going to load the bus, I'm not going to help you invade the United States, my own country. If they just said that, right, and said, I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to drive the bus. I'm not going to let them check into my hotel. I'm not going to do all this stuff. If a sufficient number of people did that, the pilots wouldn't fly them, that sort of thing. If a sufficient number of people would do that, they would stop. They would just stop because actually they are the man behind the curtain. There's really not that many of them, and they're not that powerful. What they depend on is willful compliance. They depend on, like HFM thought that I would just, roll over, right? But as soon as I put up a fight, I actually beat them, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, and so likewise, many people watching this are in key positions where they could actually do something. And that might include doing nothing. Doing something often is doing nothing, right? At the right moment, right? It's just like not returning a phone call or not telling somebody that a message came through. You read old books on this stuff when they're teaching people how to gum up the enemy's network. Often it's things like putting the wrong zip code on a letter and that sort of thing. And, it's just little things like that, or, not telling the boss that this other person called, what I mean? There's all kinds of little things like that you can just throw little pieces of grit into the machinery every chance you get. Just little pieces of grit, right? Lost paperwork, just things. Nothing illegal, just not being helpful, right? You know what I mean?
Hey, maybe illegal. Illegal. Who's making the law? The beast is making the laws. Some of the laws are not moral. Just throwing that out there. But be careful.
The beast can make the beast can make a rule that you're not allowed to think bad thoughts, right?
Right. They're doing that.
That you're not allowed to say. The beast can make a rule that you're not allowed to say the word is. And if you say the word is and it gets picked up through the AI, then you could go to jail for saying the word is. You know what I mean?
Or be debanked.
And then they start putting people in. Then they start putting people in jail for saying the word is, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if everybody says, I don't comply with that, and I'm not going to go to jail for it, and they don't willingly go to jail for it, they would have to, not do that. But they could do that. They could actually literally go, anybody that says the word, is, will go to jail, right? Mm-hmm. And people are, that's ridiculous. Is it ridiculous? They just pushed death jabs across the world and killed millions of people, and they're dying as we speak. As we speak, people are dying from that, right? And they're still rolling out more jabs. Is that ridiculous? It sure is. But they did it, and they're doing it, and they're stealing our. Look at the gold prices and whatnot just going through the roof because of the inflation, right? There's printing money like insane, right? And inflating away all of our, we're going to end up in hyperinflation, end up with a digital money. They're going to and then they're going to control everything, right?
They're not just, with inflation, they're stealing your life energy. They're not just stealing your ability to buy things, which they are doing, but they're stealing your life energy. The time you put your life and your skills and your consciousness into something to create something that you get value for, which in this case is dollars, they're stealing that from you.
Right. They are, which means you're a slave.
That's right.
Which means you're a slave.
We are slaves.
Remember
We're all slaves.
The civilized tribes, the civilized tribes, the 5 civilized tribes. What were those, right? The 5 civilized tribes, they say were the tribes that adopted, Christianity. But it was really the tribes that agreed to pay taxes. Mm-hmm. I mean, civilized meant you agreed to be a tax slave. That's the bottom line.
Right.
Really. Ultimately.
Well, slavery never ended. Now we're all slaves. Slavery never ended. Now we're all slaves. And we all live on Jones Plantation.
The Jones Plantation.
That's right. That's right.
Straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Jones Plantation. Hardcore. I mean, when I was watching the Jones Plantation, you got to keep in mind, with the things that I've studied for many years, I'm like, this is right out of the books. I mean, the 5 civilized tribes in the 11th census, that's the Jones Plantation. Mm-hmm. They were free, man. They were free Indians running around doing Indian stuff since whenever that started, way back when, nobody knows. And then we showed up. The next thing you know, we're like, we'll give you your land back if you can get yourself in this book that we made up, right? We'll give you, you pay taxes and all this stuff. Next thing you know, they're like, living on reservations, Trail of Tears. We moved them out to worthless Oklahoma. And then the next thing you know, Oklahoma found oil. Uh-oh. Yeah. Made a mistake there. You know what I mean? They're all these things. We kept moving them around. Remember, when you move somebody off of their land, their ancestral land, it makes them weaker. And that's a common brainwashing technique and a common
uprooting people.
Way to
you can't comply your way to freedom. You can't lose your way to freedom.
Never. You never ask for freedom. You don't ask for freedom.
Right.
You take it. Freedom is something you take. You physically take freedom. You don't ask. If you're asking for freedom, you're a slave already. Right? I'm begging you for freedom. It's like
right.
You're not going to get it. You're a slave.
Well, all right. Well, where could people find you? Obviously, your Substack.
Substack. I'm on X pretty often, but Substack is the best place, right? And that's Substack. Yeah, that's the best place.
I know you
subscribe on there because then because some of the stuff I do behind the paywall.
Yeah, it's awesome. You've been writing for years and years. You're a great writer. Dude, of course, man. And we don't swear, I don't care about swearing in here, but man, you're a bad motherfucker. I'm really glad I met you. Like I said, somebody told me that you looked at the film. I finally took a deep dive and I started listening to your interviews. I'm like, this dude is a bad motherfucker. He's been around. You're one of a kind, dude. I'm really glad I met you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. We got to figure out a way to get together. I definitely want you on set for whenever you want, as much as you want. I'll throw you a bit part or something if you want next film. But we got to fight her. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Let's go cannibal hunting together. We'll go cannibal hunting together.
Oh, I'll go cannibal hunting with you. I swear. Just fight. Let's find something. Epic. Let's find a reason to hang out. All right.
Okay. All right, brother.
All right.
Have a good night. Well, it's 2 a.m. here, so.
That's even later, I think, there. All right. Thank you so much, man. It's good talking with you.
Good night.
Peace. Bye. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show. You can follow me on Twitter if you want at Tregsman with 2 G's and an S, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Drew Media TV. We also have a Rumble channel, Drew Media, if you prefer there. I know a lot of people don't like YouTube. Also, if you're listening to the podcast, like on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, if it's not too much of a pain and you like the show, give it 5 stars so we can get some help from the algorithm. Otherwise, all the other links to our social media will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.